Hello, can everyone online hear us?
Yes, thank you, Debbie.
Perfect. Sorry about that.
Okay, brilliant, Deb. Well, we'll start again to a certain amount. So here we go. So I'm going to reread, or I should say, the welcome everyone to the meeting speech. So here we go. The meeting is taking place in the council chamber, Shepton Mallet, and we have members of the planning committee, officers, public speakers, and members of the public physically present in the chamber. We also have members of the public watching the meeting on Teams. Cameras within the council chamber allow us to film the meeting for viewers on Teams and also record the meeting. Therefore, any members of the public present should be aware that they may be recorded even if they are not participating in the meeting. If this causes you any concern, then please let me know now. Now, everybody seems to be okay. Members who have brought their own device with them should ensure that their cameras are switched off and, very importantly, their device, microphone and speakers are muted for the duration of the meeting. Otherwise, this causes feedback on the council sound system. Public speakers contributing to the meeting virtually should switch their cameras off and put their microphones on mute until they are invited to speak by the chair. It is not permitted for any other speaker, any other member of the public viewing by Teams to contribute to the meeting at any time. Should any member of the planning committee wish to speak, please raise your hand and catch the attention of myself, the vice chair, the legal advisor, or lead officers. When members in the chamber speak,
What about that? Can you speak? Can everyone hear me? Is the sound back?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you, Debbie.
okay, thank you. So we've got sound again. So we're moving on to apologies here. And Martin.
Yes, apologies from Councillor Tony Robbins. Councillor Ros Wyke is substituting for him.
Thank you very much. Declarations of interest. Do we have any? No. Okay. Public question time, which is item 4. So we don't have any public question time, do we?
Not that we're aware of, Chair.
No. Okay. So I believe that Tom wishes to come in and make a little speech, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Thomas Jones. I'm the area manager for South and East Development Management Services. Nice to meet you all. Just very briefly, I understand Council has received a document titled Somerset Council Briefing Note. If you've seen that, hopefully you will have realised it's not a document that's produced by Somerset Council. It's produced by applicant PR advisors, not making any comment on what it says in there, other than it wasn't prepared with any involvement of council officers, just to clarify. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. I had a slight problem with my own laptop there a second, but I think we're okay. So we're going to move on to the big item, which is planning application for the land south of Frome in the Selwood. Now, I believe that, Gwyn, you are here somewhere to give us your report, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just before I start, just to advise the committee that or the council has received 3 additional written representations in the last 48 hours relating to the application, which cover matters such as the scale of the development, infrastructure, capacity, traffic, landscape impacts, environmental impacts. Those doesn't raise any new additional items which are not already covered in the committee report. So I wasn't intending to read through those in full, but just so you're aware, there are 3 additional comments have been received. The other item I will also raise is National Highways wrote to the council yesterday regarding the holding recommendation, which is referred to in the report. I'll pick that up at the end of the presentation in terms of what that covers. So this is an outline application with for, as you can see the description there, 1,700 homes, a range of other uses. All matters are reserved except for 4 points of access to the site. It's a mixed-use development, and rather than run through the detail of the description, it is there. And if particular questions about that, I can clarify. So the site is located to the south of Frome. It's bounded to the north by the built edge of Frome, which I'll come on to explain in a minute, though it looks as though it's empty fields at the moment. And to the right by Blatchbridge Road, along the road along the bottom, you can see where my cursor is the A361 Frome bypass to the Marston Road roundabout, bounded partly on Marston Road, then cuts back in here. And then we have Little Keyford Lane, which runs through the site from south to north towards the centre of Frome. And then Paddles Lane is another existing road which runs through the site up to Marston Gate. The other item just to note is the railway line, which runs along the eastern boundary of the site. In terms of the other items, so River Frome, just pick up here, just running through the site here and flows down towards the town centre. So that's the overall position of the site. There are a few existing properties which are excluded from the red line boundary here, and some are down towards Blatchbridge, but otherwise it incorporates all their land within the red line boundary. The image on the right, which is not particularly clear, but basically the application site is here. I've just put it in the context of Frome as a whole. So that's Frome, the built area of Frome at the moment. And this is the Marston Industrial Estate. And then the Wessex Fields with people are familiar with. There's a Sainsbury's and other retail facilities here. And then so the application is the site. So that's the boundary there of the A361, the railway line again. But just to give you an idea of where it sits relative to Frome and the existing built area of Frome. In terms of the topography, just to give you an idea, so Marston Road here is the higher part of the site, and then it slopes down towards the River Frome. There's a change of elevation and topography within the site. The steepest parts are over towards the north eastern part of the site there. The application does include some land, so just showed here on the right-hand diagram, to the south of the A361 as well. That was previously identified for employment space. That's now for just as open space with no built development. As I mentioned, in terms of, if you look at the right-hand side image, there are these kind of green fields towards the edge of Frome, along the edge of the Marston Industrial Estate. However, the local plan part 2 has allocated sites here for development, and those are already some of those are already underway. So you've got the FR3A sites here off Blatchbridge Road. The FR7 site is not developed. It is allocated for development and forms part of the current application site. And then you've got the FR2 site, which is currently being built at the moment. FR8 site is an employment site yet to be built. But so although that appears as green fields there is development allocated or being built around that edge. In terms of the off-site environmental assets, just gives a highlight. So this is the application site here in the middle. There is ancient woodland, which is the green areas. Sites of special scientific interest are the yellow hatch. There is the Mells Valley Special Area of Conservation, which relates to the bat population there. And the other item here is this dotted line, which is the edge of the National Landscape Area, the former AONB area. This is one other item which I'm going to refer to later, which is Clay Hill, which is a scheduled monument. So there's a scheduled monument over here. So that just gives you an idea of what's within the wider area of the site. In terms of the on-site habitats, so this is this is a plan submitted with the application. That shows you the number of different hedgerows across the site, and the image and also picks up some trees are slightly clearer on the left-hand side. This is from the Woodland Trust, and this is just an identification of various veteran and ancient trees and other notable trees within the site. But this here just gives you an idea of the hedgerows as well within the application site. In terms of heritage designations off-site, so we've got, Sarah mentioned earlier, Clay Hill, the scheduled monument. There aren't any designated site heritage designated statutory designation in the application site, and I'll come on to that in a minute. But close by is Marston Park and the grade, which is grade 2, registered park and garden, and Marston House, which is a grade 2 star. There's the former medieval village of Titherington, and then just can't particularly make out, but there's the edge of the conservation area just to the north of the site, located where the Dippy. So that gives an idea of the off-site heritage designations. On the site, as I mentioned, there aren't any statutory designations and listed buildings on the site or scheduled monuments. The closest ones, there is the Cross Keys Pub at Blatchbridge, which is over to the right here. And then there is Keyford House on Keyford Lane, which is a grade 2 listed building, and also there's mention of the boundary wall. The shading here, there's records of a former deer park within the application site, or it spreads, the precise boundary isn't known, but that's suggesting it. The other items, which are these, just you may be able to pick up some small numbers, is where there have been investigations on the site which have identified certain archaeological remains, and those are mentioned in the report. I mentioned here we have the Marston Park and Gardens, which is along Bulls Quarries Road to the south of the site. In terms of public rights of way, there are some within the site. The boundary, these routes are within the boundary. There's public footpaths there, and also these are actually outside the application site. So there's a few footpaths which run through the site, but they're here. But that's relatively limited public access in terms of formal public rights of way within the site. In terms of the condition of the site, the image on the left identifies the flood zone. So we've got flood zone 2 and 3 along the River Frome, and then the rest of the site, which is shown in pink, is flood zone 1. As is the area to the eastern side, the River Frome, and all built development is located outside of zones 2 and 3. The image on the right relates to surface water drainage. So again, we've got the River Frome here, and then it just shows you where there are some existing channels across the site, which to drain the site. There's some culverts within the site, but quite a lot of it is just natural drainage across the site. And this gives you an idea of just the how often there may be a flooding within those areas, and so that has informed the layout of the site. In terms of the character of the area, the image on the left is taken from the Mendip Landscape Character Assessment, but also I think it's based on CPRE assessment of the areas. This just shows the dark skies, which is the National Landscape Area is a dark sky international reserve, and as you can see on the left image, the darker blue is the darker areas as you go into the National Landscape Area, whereas Frome itself, the built area of Frome, is obviously fairly well lit, and it is spreading across into the application site, which is area B2.5. That's the area here, and also on the left here. The image on the right is the conclusion of the Mendip Council Landscape Character Assessment 2021, and that identified the area B2.5 as being of low value. That's based against a number of criteria in terms of whether it's the dark skies, but also any particular special assets or landscape features within it. And the overall conclusion was that the landscape character was low, but it does abut areas of obviously higher landscape values beyond the A361. So the area B2.5 is really bounded by the A361. This is a view from Clay Hill, which I mentioned earlier. So this is to the east of the site, towards Warminster, and looking back towards Frome. So Frome extends from pretty much here, the northern edge of Frome, across here. Then you're picking up the Marston Industrial Estate and the Wessex Fields area. And then this area here is the new FR2 housing, which is being built. And then the application site extends roughly to where that brown field is on the right, the left-hand side of the image. So it kind of sits within this area here. So it is visible from Clay Hill, but is kind of an extension of the existing built area of Frome. This is a view from the northeastern side of the site. So it's the road linking between Little Keyford Lane and Blatchbridge Road. This is looking across the site. In here is Keyford House, Grade 2 listed building, which I mentioned earlier. And then this is the FR2 housing site, which is currently being built. But as you can see, the existing site is in agricultural use. It's predominantly Grade 4, so it's not best and most versatile agricultural land, although it is in use for agricultural purposes at the moment. This is the same viewpoint, but looking south towards Titherington, and to the Blatchbridge on the left, and then you've got the Greensand Ridge in the long far distance as part of the National Landscape Area. But again, this is just giving an indication of the type of landscape which is there at the moment. Then this is looking back towards the site. So this is looking north. So this is the other side of the A361, and the FR2 site kind of uses a point of reference in photographs. So where we are is up here on the top of the ridge line, and it starts to come down the hill. So this is beyond the site boundary, looking in. The application is submitted in outline, as I said at the beginning, and there are a series of parameter plans which set out the various development specification for the site. So, for example, on this one, land use, the areas of blue are residential use. The areas of green are landscape or open space. The areas of this kind of slightly dark pink area are for predominantly residential use, but might include some employment space. There's a small area of employment space over on the very southern area here, and that relates to a site off-site, which health and safety executives said there shouldn't be residential in this part of the site. This is the area the south of the A361, which is for open space, no built. The area here is the kind of the mixed use centre of the site, and then there is an area of employment use on the other side of the River Frome, which is for a mix of B2, B8, and Class E uses. Another parameter plan is to do with building height. So the lighter colour is the lower buildings, so 2-storey plus roof around the edge of the site, and then increasing in height towards the centre, which is where the community hub is. And that is up to 4 stories, but their maximum heights. And then the employment is 2 stories, but of commercial scale. In terms of housing density, again, we've got the lowest density on the northern edge towards the Little Keyford Lane, and then increasing in density to this area, then slightly higher density here, and then the highest densities again towards the centre of the site where there's community hub. And I should also point out there's a school in this area here, is a primary school to be located. Green infrastructure. This is just depicts up in terms of I mentioned the areas of open space and areas to walk, and a larger area of open space here. There's also allotments and orchards, and the proposal is that Little Keyford Lane and Paddles Lane become greenways rather than for through traffic. Then here within River Frome, again open space, and there's a proposal for an informal sports pitch, and that's covered in the report. Is why there isn't sports provision here. It's being provided, or contribution for its provision off site. The final one is in terms of access. 4 points of access. So we've got the Manor Road access here, which will serve this part of the site. There's no through access, although this dotted line shows this is for a bus route through the site, but there's no through access between the Marston Road access and the access here off the A361. So the site is effectively divided in 2 principal points of access from here and from the Marston Road, and also from the A361. And then there's an access off Blatchbridge Road to the employment area on the eastern part of the site. There is an access off Little Keyford Lane. However, this serves the development, but is only for buses and pedestrians and cyclists. It's not a route for vehicles. So cars or other vehicles would need to come out of the site either onto the A361 if they're in this part of the site, or onto Marston Road if they're serving this part of the site. Quite an issue as part of which has come up in a number of the comments on the application relates to traffic impacts. This just to give you an idea of the extent of the traffic modelling which was undertaken, which looked at journey times on particular routes across the town, and across the A361, and then linking Blatchbridge Road into the town as well. And then this is just some of the particular junctures which were and routes which were examined as well. So just to give you an idea of the extent. It excludes the A36. That's because there was a separate study done looking at the impact of the development and other sites within Frome on the Beckington and White Row roundabouts, and that is where the National Highways holding recommendation applied. They didn't have the A361 is a Somerset road, as the other ones. The only strategic part of the strategic road network is the A36 close to the site. In terms of the existing public transport, the 30 bus route is the dark blue here, which kind of comes towards the site but doesn't actually connect through to go as far as the Mount and then into town, and then across the east here. The proposal is to extend the bus route into the site, and also to connect with the station, which is located here, and also the health centre, which is here, and the college. So the proposal is that the 30 bus route is extended to into the site. There's also proposals for active travel routes. So this is the Marston round. This is the access from Marston Road, and that's just showing potential connection improvements through to Oakfield Academy, and this towards the Gorehage Junction and towards town, just in terms of potential for off-site active travel routes. Part of the application, so the parameter plans are for approval, and those are, so that would be, if permission is granted, that would be covered. There's also design guidance, which is also submitted for approval to the Design Principles Framework document. I'll quickly go through that, but that just covers, it's a way of including an element of design guidance at this stage. So rather than just saying it'll be, look at the design and access statement, which has no formal status, this would be an approved document. So it looks at the site, identifies a number of character areas, and then looks at particular building types within those areas as a way of providing some clear guidance. And there would be design codes which would be submitted with reserve matters after that. It also includes guidance on sustainability, and both in terms of design and also principles about the levels of CO2 emission reduction, and also the use of renewables. Provides guidance on streets, and again, this is a useful way of just providing some clear guidance at this stage, rather than just relying on the parameter plans. Then the final one in terms of the phasing and delivery. So the image on the left just shows the phases. So it would start with the development off Marston Road into this part of the site with the open space in here. And then the second phase would come off the A361 junction. So here you can just see as it would be built out. The area to the south of the A361 comes through as part of phase one, because that provides replacement habitat for the bats. There are bats which are known to fly across the site, so that's provided there. And then the school would be provided here. And on the right-hand side is just an indication of when the various the build-outs would come in terms of the phases of housing development. And then the bottom here is the school, and when that would come through and on being developed on the site. In terms of the recommendation, the application is being recommended for approval, but before that stage, as it were, if members are resolved to grant planning permission, the application does need to be referred to the Secretary of State as a departure from the local plan. It's outside the development boundary, therefore it is a departure, and so it has to be referred to them. They then can advise the council whether they wish to call in the application to determine it themselves, or the Secretary of State, or whether they allow advise the council that it can continue with determination of the application. There's also the National Highways have put the holding recommendation in place that related to identifying mitigation for the A36 junctions, and we received a correspondence from them yesterday saying that they are satisfied with the identified mitigation, and there is a planning condition in the application, in the report rather, and they are proposing some minor changes to that wording, and that is something which is covered in the third bullet on the report, which is that we're proposing that such non-material amendments to conditions as may be appropriate. So that we propose that is dealt with via that part of the recommendation. But the holding recommendation is at the moment is still in place, but say the correspondence we received yesterday says that they just subject to the condition wording, they will be issuing an updated advice to remove that holding recommendation. And then the final part is there is section 116 legal agreement and heads of terms in the committee report. And obviously that would need to be completed prior to if planning permission was to be granted. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Gwilym. We'll now move on to the speakers. We have quite a few. So if you could stick as close as you can to the 3 minutes, that would be appreciated. Okay, so let's get started. The first one is Mr. Mark Pollock, please, representing the Friends of the River Frome. And you've got 3 minutes, but you know how to turn on the Great, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Friends of the River Frome object to this major development for two main reasons. Firstly, there is a very well documented problem with combined sewage outflows discharging sewage into the river. In 2023, there were sewage spills into the river for over 400 hours. Selwood Parish Council will be giving you more detail on that appalling situation in their presentation. This major residential development of 1,700 new homes plus new businesses must not make this bad situation any worse. Foul water infrastructure plans for this critical issue should be agreed up front and before any decision is made, rather than relying on conditions. Condition 23 is linked to an indicative only and preliminary foul drainage strategy with, and I quote, phasing not considered at this stage. This is not good enough. And why is this not a pre-commencement condition like condition number 2? The proposed conditions do not guarantee a strategic and holistic approach to the delivery of foul drainage infrastructure, but instead allows the drainage strategy to evolve on a piecemeal basis with details from different house builders. This is a recipe for disaster for river users and wildlife alike. Secondly, while welcoming the removal of one of the two playing fields within the Riverside Park, we would wish to see the remaining playing field and play area relocated as they encroach on flood zones 2 and 3, as recognised by paragraph 10.9.3 in your report. The remaining playing field will be unusable in the winter months, and the area would be better left for natural flood management purposes, which would be more in keeping with the landscape character of the river corridor as envisaged by the agreed and community-led River Frome strategy. In any event, Friends of the River Frome would wish to be involved from the outset with the development of the Riverside Park if the development is allowed. Finally, while not now a formal objection, we remain concerned about the risk of flooding downstream given recent flooding events at Wallbridge in Frome, accelerating climate change, and a lack of any strategic approach to flood attenuation across the town as a whole to address potential cumulative impacts from multiple development sites, not just this development site, but other sites across the town. We are also concerned that there will be adequate resources made available for future maintenance arrangements and enforcement of conditions during the 15-year build-out period. Conditions are recommended in our written submission.
Can you just wind up, please?
Yes, I'm on to my final paragraph, Chairman. Conditions are recommended in our written submission, including a specific condition rather than just a general condition and an informative to prevent pollution into the river from the employment area and from road runoff both during and after construction. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pollock. And next we have Johanna Maggs, who is representing Stop SGC. And you will have 3 minutes, Mr. Maggs.
Chair, councillors. Stop SGC sought legal advice on the current proposal. Our planning lawyer found 3 key reasons why you can refuse this application on planning grounds alone. It conflicts with the adopted development plan. It conflicts with the current National Planning Policy Framework 2023 and planning policy guidance. It fails to comply with a significant number of the statutory requirements in the 2017 EIA regulations. You can read more in the email Stop SGC sent to you on Thursday, the 28th of November. Our lawyer also reviewed the officer's report, which raised more concerns. Active Travel England has not, but should have been consulted. Pages 32 to 33 contain a planning policy note that reads, wider impacts of the proposal on designated areas and assets beyond the site need to be considered. These impacts should have been taken into account in the environmental statement, but this line in the report appears to acknowledge that the ES has failed to assess these impacts and therefore fails to satisfy the requirements of EIA developments. The report also references that Somerset East cannot show a 5-year housing land supply, and so paragraph 11 of the NPPF should apply. But this raises serious issues too. Firstly, the HLS has only been calculated for Somerset East, not all of Somerset. The report states that there has been no historic under-delivery of housing in Frome, but that period surveyed, 2019 to 2022, falls below the target. But this period covers COVID, when there was a general slowdown in house building, an exceptional period that distorts recent trends. No great weight should therefore be placed on this figure. Even if paragraph 11 of the NPPF is engaged, another adverse effect of permitting this scheme would be to undermine the emerging spatial strategy for Somerset as a whole. Plus, Frome would experience disproportionately high levels of housing at the expense of other areas identified as more suitable for housing and employment, and the resulting imbalance would threaten the vision, aims and objectives of the Local Plan Part 2. It's worth noting that Mendip has done pretty well in meeting its housing targets versus other districts, and despite what LVA say in their latest fancy briefing document, this isn't about satisfying a 5-year housing supply. This is a 15-year proposal that won't be completed until 2040 at the earliest. So why are we even considering this site when it hasn't followed the planning process? Why is one of the planning officers presenting today not paid for by Somerset? What about any other site put forward in the Frome area between now and 2040? Are we just putting all of our eggs in LVA's basket? What motivates them? Community engagement or profit? What if the houses don't sell and then they don't build the other social housing they promised, which is one of the big reasons why everyone's so for it? What would the day-to-day life be like living in and around a building site for 15 years? Doesn't a proposal on this scale warrant a public inquiry? There are loads of questions and I don't have the time today to ask them all, but you do. So I urge you, and with the remaining seconds I have left, I would just like to remind
You are very
here
close, please, if you could wind
there
up.
are clear planning reasons to refuse this application. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Mr. Maggs. Next we have Fletcher Robinson or Hugh Williams, representing CPRE Somerset, please. Thank you. And you have 3 minutes or so.
Okay, thank you. This is not a master planned proposal, as explained on page 86 of the officer's report, but not in the presentation today. The site will be sold off in parcels of undisclosed size to individual developers who will submit their own reserve matters applications with their own design codes and so forth. The applicant is asking Somerset Council to agree to a system whereby it will have to check whether future reserve matters applications by individual developers comply with a set of vaguely worded design parameters before those applications are submitted. Examples of vagueness: the local centre character area, for example, should have, quote, the widest possible range of local facilities. Hedges and veteran trees should be retained, quote, if possible. Employment land will be built out, quote, according to demand. The design principles document states that the illustrative master plan is, quote, one possible way to deliver the site. In practice, the vague phrasing of these parameters means that Somerset Council will have to rubber stamp almost everything. There's no guarantee here of quality placemaking. The officer's report claims this proposal accords with the Town and Country Planning Association's guidance for garden villages and cities. Nothing could be further from the truth. For example, the TCPA guidance specifically requires the following for garden communities: plan-led development, not speculative development on unallocated sites; a standalone, self-sufficient new settlement, not development tacked onto an historic market town, significantly impacting its countryside setting. The word garden here is just being used as a convenient label. Now, lastly, this proposal is trying to preempt plan-led decisions about the appropriate location and scale for future growth in the district. The applicant claims it can't be refused on prematurity grounds, but the wording of NPPF paragraph 50 contradicts that. Members can refuse this application on prematurity grounds because this large-scale development and open countryside on the edge of Frome would prejudice the outcome of the plan-making process, and because the LPP2 appeal inspector said that a Frome growth area should self-evidently, quote, be considered in a plan-led context. At the very least, this should be deferred pending Somerset Council obtaining a legal opinion on this prematurity point, so that members can be properly informed before being asked to vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Chair, can I make a point?
Really, your turn comes later.
No, I just would like to ask all members of the planning committee to give their undivided attention to the planning officer and to all these people who've come today to speak, and not please look at their telephones or look at their computers. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I will reciprocate
That's aimed at me because I've been looking at my phone. I've actually been looking at mapping of the area on my phone.
Rick, sorry, I didn't even notice that, but yeah.
Okay, that's our little squabble. We can move on. Hold on. Our next person is Richard Swan from the Frome Civic Society, please.
Is this on? Yeah. Councillors, Frome District Civic Society urges you to refuse this application on multiple planning grounds. This regionally strategic urban extension falls completely outside the local plan. It has therefore not been subject to the proper scrutiny of plan-making process or consulted upon by neighbouring councils. In fact, its only claim to your consideration today is the application of the NPPF tilted balance in favour of sustainable housing development. Providing 1,700 new homes over 15 years is in theory a public benefit, but in our view it comes at much too high a cost. It will not deliver genuinely affordable homes at the urgent rate that is needed. This is a peripheral development far beyond reasonable walking distance from the town, with no viable public transport network. Given Frome's chronic employment deficit, the highest in the district, we do not expect new residents to work locally. The resulting high level of car dependency will degrade the environment, clog up Frome's narrow streets, and channel more traffic onto the highway network. The scheme is, in every sense, unsustainable. We believe there is a very high risk that the project cannot be delivered successfully as a coherent town extension. There is no viable framework for strategic governance over the life of the project. If the existing consortium of landowners achieve an outline planning consent, they will sell up, leaving no governance or consortium to carry through the development. Just a diverse assortment of competing house builders who bid highest for each field. They will have no motivation or compulsion to work together to deliver an overarching master plan. We have seen this even in the much smaller allocation south of Keyford now being developed. The application has produced a set of design principles to fill this governance void. These are no more than basic policy compliance guidelines. They say that the bland and meaningless principles should be developed into detailed design codes, that all future house builders will follow them. But we say these would be impossible to draft effectively or enforce, even if Somerset Council had the expertise and resources. Anything set down now will fail to respond to the known and unknown variables over the next 15 years, such as material, labour costs and availability, building regulations and standards, climate change, the volatile property markets. And of course, they will prove completely impossible to enforce across a huge volume of reserved matters applications.
Could you wind up, please? Your 3
The
minutes.
proposal is unsound, unsustainable and harmful. The adverse impacts clearly outweigh the benefits. The NPPF supports refusal in these circumstances. We urge you to say no.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, could I'd like to quickly make a comment in regards to what Helen said. Not only was I checking mapping on my phone, it's commenting to me, I'm also running a stopwatch as vice chair to make sure our timing is reasonably correct. So Helen, please, could you confirm what people are doing, whether it's aimed at me or not? I'm running the stopwatch because I'm assisting my chairman. Okay, thank you.
I wasn't actually aiming it at you, Edric, and I apologise. Sorry.
Okay, thank you, Helen, and thank you, Edric, and I'm sure that you can take this outside of the room. Okay. Okay, thank you, Susie.
Chair, I'm just writing notes on what people are saying on my laptop, because it's really important to take in what you're saying.
Yeah, we're going to move on now, and thank you, Claire. Okay, the next person to speak will be Mr. Ken McCall, representing himself. And you have 3 minutes also.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. My name is Ken McCall. I'm a retired ex-member of the Chartered Institute of Building. Dear councillors, it's good to know that the politics of the parties that you represent puts environment, communities and sensible and common sense planning high up on the agenda. But sadly, none of these aforementioned values are included in this proposal. Here is what Somerset Council's own planning policy unit has said about the Selwood Garden community. It's in section 8 of the officer's recommendation. It says, this is a proposal of unprecedented scale for Mendip, and experience from other parts of Somerset suggests that schemes of this scale have a high risk of delays to delivery. A substantial amount of growth is already planned for Frome and agreed in the adopted plan, and the proposal would result in a disproportionate level of growth in Frome compared with other principal settlements. The council would need to be satisfied that the cumulative development resulting from the existing allocations and commitments and this site is sustainable. This work on cumulative effects has not been done, and Somerset's planning policy team acknowledges that this SGC is extraordinarily out of scale. What we are facing is the success of speculative developers taking advantage of loopholes in the national planning system. There were nearly 500 objections. This is only half to the SGC, including a very firm one from Frome Town Council, also from the RUH in Bath, strongly opposed to the input that they would have to put up with, already overstretched. Frome Civic Societies we've already heard, Selwood Parish Council and Chapman Sade Parish Council. In addition to the environmental impacts and social consequences for the town, they are numerous and complex. This is evident from the sheer number of 106 agreements that are needed even at this stage in the game. The permission is simply the red line of the development, i.e. the swathe of beautiful countryside. Everything else is left to reserve matters. This is hardly surprising, as this developer-led scheme is through and through a developer-led scheme. I wonder whether the public even knew that when they wrote an objection to the council about the scheme, the case officer receiving the objection was not, however, a Somerset Council employee. His time, like the time to produce the many transport assessments, environmental assessments, and most of the other assessments for a development as big and as complicated as this, has been paid for by the developer. This situation reminds me of someone's old dad, whose favourite phrase was...
Unfortunately, could you start to wind up now, please? You've hit your 3 minutes. You hit your 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. I will just come to the end. Since Frome was voted the best town in Britain nationally, it has attracted many visitors, and if the wrong decision is made today, the national press will be extremely critical. But if the right decision is made, wouldn't it be great if the national headlines read, "Somerset councillors protect Frome from destruction"? Thank you, Chairman.
And thank you very much indeed. Interesting. Okay, next we have James Tizard representing the LVA. Good afternoon, and you have 3 minutes also.
Good afternoon, councillors. I am James Tizard. I'm the managing partner of LVA. I've been involved with this project for the past 6 years with Neil and Matthew. As a company, we're very proud of this application that you have tabled before you. What you have before you is an exemplar scheme. Many of the objectors agree that what is set out before you in the master plan, framework plans, and design principles document is well thought out. But they don't believe it will be delivered. This is a concern that I understand due to previously poorly planned development that's happened before us. However, I can provide you a cast iron guarantee of the design and quality here and now. I have a personal vested interest in the delivery of this scheme. I'm deeply proud of what is before you and 100% committed to ensuring it is realised in full. The scheme is viable. We've costed everything with contingencies down to the smallest of retaining walls. We as a business are delivering over 80 projects across the UK. We're one of 3 parties involved in the 10,000 unit scheme in East Devon. We know what we are doing. We've built a reputation of delivering high quality schemes that deliver the required core infrastructure locally. To ensure what you have before you is delivered, we have carefully established the parameter plans and the design principles framework with a straitjacket our development partners. Our interest remains in the scheme until the final completion of the final house. There is simply no way we will allow developers to deviate from what we have set out. They'll be bound by contractual obligations with us, as well as the planning consent and the design principles document and the Section 106 agreement that we will be signing. I hope I've made mine and LVA's commitment to the scheme plain and clear. This is one of the largest schemes that the committee would have considered. However, a scheme of this size is required to meet the desperate housing need of the town. It allows the infrastructure improvements that are required to meet this housing need to be carefully planned and delivered alongside the housing, something that a series of smaller sites scattered across the town cannot. This is planned development. The housing need in Frome is extensive. There's currently no alternative way to meet the need and deliver the infrastructure required than through SGC. This is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to address the housing crisis and deliver the housing and infrastructure that is required, something the past decade of unplanned development has failed to do so. The choice today is stark: either unplanned development scattered across the area, or the comprehensively planned proposal before you today, with a steady stream of infrastructure, affordable housing for the town over a 10-year period. For these reasons, we request you endorse your officer's recommendation. Thank you.
And thank you very much. You were inside your 3 minutes, James, so that's good. Neil Brandt, NBC. Please. Wherever you are, Neil. Yeah. And you also have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, councillors. I'm a chartered highway engineer and transport planner consultant with approaching 40 years experience. I've been a resident of Frome for 22 years and am therefore very well versed on the issues that relate to the town, particularly highways matters, given my profession. I've been part of the Salewood Garden team for over 5 years. My brief was to ensure the existing problems at various roads and junctions in and around the town are addressed, the impacts of the new development minimised to an acceptable level, and how sustainable modes of travel will be maximised. The infrastructure works have been informed by 2 substantial traffic models of a scale unprecedented in Frome and Mendip. The geographic coverage is extended as far as Berkeley, Chapman Slade, Beckington, Nutty Catch, and the whole of the Frome urban area north of the river in great detail, and to a lesser extent of detail south of the river. North of the river. Millions of data entries, including mobile phone data and conventional traffic surveys, have been used to build the models, which have been calibrated and validated to standards of accuracy required by the Department for Transport. It is a true and accurate reflection of traffic conditions across Frome. The cumulative effects of all extant permitted and planned development in Frome, Beckington and Road are included in the models, as well as growth in traffic regionally through other factors. In particular, your own plan in policy DP27 recognises the issues that the affects the A36 roundabouts at Beckington and White Row, which are an existing problem, and solving it will cost circa £4 million and being painstakingly worked through with National Highways, who have also made it clear that Salewood Garden is the only way to meet that substantial gap in funding. The traffic models have been thoroughly audited by Somerset Council and National Highways, as well as their external consultants, and they form an agreed basis from which traffic impacts at Salewood Garden are determined. A comprehensive package of highway infrastructure works are proposed, and they have been subject to both technical design and safety auditing. The proposals are to spend significant sums of money on improvement works at the A361 Marston, Blacksbridge and Berkeley roundabouts, Gorehedge and the Butts. In addition, £1.68 million of the sustainable travel provision is committed to by Salewood Garden by way of subsidy of the number 30 bus service to increase its frequency and extend the route, as you heard in the officer's report, funding of active travel routes and infrastructure, such as routes to the station, town centre and Oakfield Academy, funding of an EV car club vehicle and public e-bike and scooter schemes, green travel vouchers for residents. The sustainable travel measures and mode shift targets are secured by a travel plan, with a further £163,000 investment in that, and a substantial 6-figure safeguarding sum that is held by the County Council to ensure them to...
Okay, you had your 3 minutes, I'm afraid, if you'd like to wind up.
Sorry, I've got breathing difficulties.
Quickly do it.
Yeah. To enable them to intervene in mode shift targets over the 15-year period. In conclusion, this is far from being a car-dependent scheme. We have delivered an exemplar approach to transport for Salewood Garden, prioritising people over the private car and an unprecedented level of investment in sustainable and active travel. I note that our hard work is backed up by the clear recommendation of the Highway Department and that of National Highways, who now offer no objection to the scheme, and in the context, the council must have tangible evidence on which to base
minutes now. That's got to be it.
Sorry, I have a heart condition, so I have to talk slower.
I don't think you're that slow at talking.
Can that be taken into account, please?
How much more have you got? Okay. Thank you anyway for your contribution. And next is Frome Town Council. Councillor Steve Tanner, please. And you have 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Chair. You'll note we objected to this development when it came before our planning committee in May. These reasons are still relevant, as well as the Section 106, and we believe the cumulative effects this will have on Frome. I want to focus on 2 main areas, the Section 106 and the Design Principles Framework. We feel the Section 106 agreements as presented are a huge missed opportunity. They give very little to Frome. Many millions are being paid to highways and education, a fraction going to Frome. The uplift to local infrastructure is minimal. Education money is hardly ever spent in Frome. We've seen land lay dormant for decades. So where and on what this money is intended to be spent on would be very interesting. Going forward, it's imperative that both Selwood Parish Council and Frome Town Council are party to all Section 106 discussions. We've been requesting this for some time now. The result is a bit of money to redevelop Gore Hedge and an active travel plan from a development that will generate profit of millions, hundreds of millions of pounds perhaps. At the very least, the developer should be paying the balance of what is needed to complete the works of Gore Hedge and fully fund the agreed Frome LC WIP. The medical practice has said that it has insufficient infrastructure to cope with an extra 1,700 houses, approximately 5,000 residents. How can this be the case when the number one concern for residents, as evidenced by the MP and our townwide engagement, the only Section 106 money is going to RUH? Residents' perception is that a very bad situation will get worse. What is the due diligence that's been done to confirm this? There is an opportunity here to better the health service for the town. If the medical practice building has capacity, there are other areas that the funding can be spent off. There is a desperate need for affordable housing with Frome, but only 30% is being provided. We would like to see 40% and an 80-20 split. Furthermore, there are no one-bedroom open market units, and we think there should be a 6-month local residents first policy on all housing, again, as evidenced by our own vision for Frome. This development represents a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to obtain funding for many of the townwide improvements that are so desperately needed. But that won't happen without engagement of the town and parish councils. We keep hearing that to ask for extra items is unreasonable. Well, frankly, this Section 106 agreement is unreasonable to the residents of Frome. The design principles framework, there are numerous examples of how initial promises at outline stage are gradually eroded by reserved matters and variations or agreed by delegated authority with no consultation with local councils. Concerns and objections will be lost under an avalanche of reserved matters application and condition discharges. What legal framework is Somerset Council going to put in place to ensure that in 5 and 6 and 7 years' time, these principles will be adhered to and not eroded by spurious viability assessments? There should be a local delivery vehicle or a standalone master document to monitor all concerns and conditions. This document should be submitted with every reserved matters application and copies kept updated by Selwood Parish Council, Frome Town Council and Somerset Council. TCPA guidelines state that garden villages can most effectively be implemented by a local delivery vehicle to provide leadership, uphold standards, infrastructure delivery, embed public participation and monitor progress. We really strongly believe this is needed. There is reference to a robust mechanism to ensure the strategic vision for the site will be delivered. We ask, what is this and who is going to monitor it and what legal powers does it have?
You're well over your 3 minutes, Steve. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome.
I think 3 minutes is tough for something like this, I have to admit. Thank you.
Thank you. And our next one is Mr. Richard Hammonds, please, or Councillor Richard Hammonds from Selwood.
Chair, this was the gentleman who asked to do a presentation. Remember, we discussed it and he did registering time with it. So will you give me a minute to put it up on the screen before he starts?
You can sure put it on.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Just for to maintain understanding. The Blacksbridge Road was referred to by the planning officer is referred to in my presentation as the B3092. So they are the same road. Just want to make that clear.
Yeah. I know it area inside out. I'm not on the site visit as well.
Each screen as you want. Okay. Just click on each one.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Debbie.
Presentation mode.
Hey, will you be ready to start your 3 minutes?
It's not on the screen. Who is it? Just...
Hey.
No, I don't think so.
1 second. What's that? Just click through.
Okay.
Technology, all good fun. Right. Selwood Parish Council has intimate knowledge of the area, and we hope you will value this contribution to aid your decision making. We have significant concerns about the roads and access. This will be a car-dependent commuter suburb with over 4,000 cars. Currently, HGVs on the A361 Froome bypass use the downslope from Blatchbridge roundabout to enable them to climb the steep hill to the Marston Gate roundabout. This steep hill is known locally as the ski slope. SGC will put a new roundabout at the bottom of the ski slope, upsetting this dynamic. This will stall traffic. The National Standards for Highways Design Manual for Roads and Bridges stipulates that such roads with an incline of 2% or more need a climbing lane. This hill has an incline of 5.48% for 925 metres. This is much steeper than the 5 existing climbing lanes near Froome. SGC's roundabout will cause traffic chaos on the bypass, so they should pay for a new climbing lane. It is proposed that the entrance to the Blatchbridge Industrial Estate is between 2 houses, and the priority of the B3092 will be altered to serve the estate. This road takes 10% of the traffic into Froome. This creates risks. Cars turning left and right towards Froome, four homes with car access on the bend, all contending with HGV traffic. Why blight the hamlet of Blatchbridge? We recommend a dedicated access road off the new roundabout with a bridge over the River Froome. More expensive, but the right solution. To access the nature park and Marston Lakes, they're putting a Pegasus crossing down by the roundabout. Who puts traffic light crossings on a bypass? Then it's a 600-metre walk down narrow country roads with no pavements to reach the parks. We recommend a bridge crossing the bypass here, giving immediate road access to the parks and not slowing traffic. They're proposing a bus route down Little Keyford Lane. This lane is very narrow, and with the parked cars, the usable width is 2.4 metres or less. It's single traffic all the way from the B3092. Buses are 2.5 metres wide. There's no space for passing. 80 houses use this lane. Driving a bus down it is ridiculous. It won't work. Please find another route. This junction is notorious. There was another fatality here earlier this year. Right turns are dangerous. SGC and other developments to the south of Froome will add 5,400 cars, so it will just get worse. This junction needs traffic lights to make it safe. Without all these recommendations, SGC will cause traffic chaos, traffic blight, and traffic jams. Eventually, Somerset Council will have to do these road improvements, no doubt after many years of traffic misery and at great cost to us all, the taxpayers. Thank you for your time.
And thank you, Richard. Okay, our next person is Councillor Jim Dowling. Dowling? Yeah. You have 3 minutes as well, Councillor.
Right, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Committee. Selwood Parish Council is a small parish that surrounds most of Froome, but the development is entirely within the parish boundary of Selwood. We, along with Froome Town Council, have engaged with the developers of SGC since its inception in about 2018. And though we have not wholeheartedly supported this application, we are in favour of infrastructure-led developments instead of the piecemeal developments that are currently occurring. And of course, we're also against, of course, this loss of good agricultural land. However, there are many areas of concern which need to be addressed, and before approval, that cannot be watered down by delegated powers when the developers come back pleading poverty. I will just concentrate on sewage and foul water disposal. Others have already mentioned other concerns. Modern developments separate foul and clean water, but then discharge this foul water into an outdated sewage system
into which both the sewage and rain and flood water enter. To prevent backups during extreme weather conditions, there are a number of monitored storm drain overflows throughout Frome, but there are also some areas of the town without monitored overflows where problems have occurred. In 2023, there were 360 recorded overflows from 13 sites, 3 of which had no overflows. So from the remaining 10, there are an average of over 30 overflows from each site during the year. The worst sites were at Little Keyford, which is part of this development, Adderwell, and of course Wessex Water's own treatment centre at Spring Gardens. These storm overflows were designed to relieve pressure only during flash floods. Despite global warming causing more heavy rain occurrences, we do not get anything like that number of flash floods in a year. However, these overflows do have serious implications, not only for the pollution of the River Frome, but also some of the solid deposited can be a serious health hazard for local residents. Water companies do have a record of underinvestment, and Wessex Water do admit that Frome area has a high risk of sewer incapacity. Therefore, to discharge foul water from 6,000 residents, plus the industrial waste that will also...
I'm sorry, Mr. Dowling, you're
into an already overloaded and outdated system, this should not be permitted without a detailed drainage plan and a detailed timescale to implement the upgrades. If many concerns are not conditioned or met, then Selwood would want this application to be either refused or deferred.
Okay, thank you very much. And our next person is, Councillor Mick Dunk, please. And Mick, you have 3 minutes.
Chair. I was going to try and clarify exactly how many acres of farmland we're talking about here, but I'm going to say hundreds, just for the sake of...
I believe it's 240.
Well, I've read something else somewhere else, but I'm going to say 240 then, with your permission. Thank you, everyone. This application involves 240 acres of farmland rated as 3A, 3B and 4. This is all productive. There is no mitigation that I know of for the loss of such farmland. This area has great public amenity value as it is the start of the countryside around Frome. This amenity will be lost if the application is approved. The environmental statement considers the effects on landscape as major of adverse. The planning report on page 22 confirms this as a significant scale of impact and subsequent major to moderate adverse effects on the landscape. On page 52, it says local plan policy DP4, Mendip Landscapes, states that proposals for development that would individually or cumulatively significantly degrade the quality of a local landscape will not be supported. The planning consultant's response relies on the applicant's Green Infrastructure Parameter Plan. Page 56. If the green infrastructure is properly managed and appropriately funded on an ongoing basis, these major to moderate adverse effects are not in themselves considered to be a reason for planning refusal of planning permission. I have no confidence in this reasoning. The impact on the AONB is acknowledged, but the report concludes that this is minimised because the development is contained within the bypass and the effect on the dark sky reserve is sufficiently limited by conditions. I also have my doubts about this. The landscape consultee comments, I conclude that there are major to moderate adverse effects arising from the proposed development that cannot be fully mitigated. And also, given the significant scale of impact and subsequent major to moderate adverse effects of the proposed development on the landscape,
This will need to be assessed in the round with other material considerations. Please note that the CPRE have objected, citing the loss of farmland and the substantial harm to the landscape setting of the town and its river. Is this all acceptable? Any mitigation proposed by the applicant cannot sufficiently mitigate the destruction of productive land, the public amenity, the substantial impact to settlement character, loss of a much valued landscape, substantial harm to the setting of nearby listed buildings, the integrity of the AONB and dark skies, the possible loss of over 3.3 kilometres of hedgerow, the threat to notable ancient and veteran trees, and last but not least, yet more damage to the Mells Valley area of conservation. This committee will, can I just finish up? This committee will decide this unprecedented, premature and unsustainable application. My conclusion is that the adverse impacts will significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits to Frome. I urge you to refuse this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mick. And next we have Councillor Shane Collins, please.
I've also got to get a picture up on screen before Shane starts speaking. Thanks.
Okay. And you've got 3 minutes.
I'll try and speed.
You'll be as fast as you can, Shane.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Which technical hitch?
Delay.
The next one. Or the other one.
Are you ready, Shane?
No.
No, still
No, not yet.
It's just a street map of Frome. I'm sure you're familiar with it, but just to try and take you through the medieval streets. Okay, can that go a bit larger? Can we? So we can really. Okay, well, it shows 1 and 4, which is the main bits I'm going to be talking to. Sorry? I'm still doing my nails. Right. Can I? Yep.
Right, we start you now.
Okay, thank you. This proposal is the largest expansion of Frome since St Aldham founded our town over 1,300 years ago. Illustrative master plan. What is proposed is 1,700 houses, over 6,000 people and just over 4,000 cars. Currently, Frome's population is around 29,000, so that's a 23% increase in population, which will lead to a squeeze on local services in NHS, dentists, schools, and in particular roads. Whilst the illustrative master plan aims to answer some of these questions, we should not be fooled. To quote LVA, in the event that the planning permission is approved, the illustrative master plan would not form part of that decision. It is a plan that simply shows one way in which the site could be developed in compliance with the parameter plans and design principle framework. It should also be noted that LVA are not developers. They are, quote, land promoters, investors, and asset managers. If permission is granted, they will sell on the site, probably on a field-by-field basis to individual developers. I stress, developers do not have to follow the illustrative master plan. Housing for local people. Currently, we have 1,200 households on a gold or silver waiting list in Mendip, 52% needing a one-bedroom flat. SGC includes 30% or 510 affordable homes, of which only 70% or 357 are for social rent. So only 20% of the total of 1,700 homes are for social rent. Why is it not the local plan standard 80% for social rent instead of 70%? But looking at the build out programme, we see that only 106 affordable homes by 2030, 260 by 2036 and 510 by 2040. So an average of 23 social rent homes a year, but starting in 2030 is not going to solve the housing crisis. The roads of Frome. The first thing to note is that the traffic assessment is from December 2019 and based on the 2011 census. Since then, 1,759 houses have been built or approved and 1,387 cars have been added. So this is 5,400 cars in total, including SGC. According to the planning officer, there is no fully designed scheme for roads into Frome, which seems incredible for a scheme of this size with obvious traffic issues. The main road in is the Butts, which has on-street parking, and so cars cannot pass in opposite directions and already subject to delays. And that is number 1, the blue line. Locks Hill, Portway, Christchurch East, which has on-street parking, so only one car can pass at a time, leads up to a steep, difficult and generally queued turn onto Wesley Slope. So people turn off Locks Hill onto Alexandra Road, more on-street parking, so Alexandra Road will have come one way. Let us be clear, National Highways have requested for the transport assessment from nearly 5 years ago to be reviewed. This has not been done. NPPF paragraph 115 states that development should only be prevented or refused on highway grounds if there would be an unacceptable impact on highway safety or the residual cumulative impacts on the road network would be severe. I would argue this scheme
Okay, Shane, you're up
require,
to 3 minutes 45.
last paragraph. I would argue this scheme will require 3 or 4 one-way streets in Frome. This is not taken into account in the transport assessment or budget and therefore is reason for refusal. So on behalf of more than 500 people and civic bodies in Frome who have objected, I urge you to refuse this application on transport grounds.
Okay, thank you, Shane. Yeah, I think I'll stretch it out for him a little bit. Yeah. Matthew Kendrick, the agent, please. Yeah, one. Okay, you'll have 3 minutes and a bit. Okay. Yes.
We're more than happy with 80% social rent. If that's what's if desired, we have not shirked on any of our Section 106 responsibilities on this scheme, so that's fine. Also picking up on Councillor Tanner's comments earlier and Jim's, the local councillor from Selwood, we've engaged with them throughout this process and we want to keep engaging with them. They're well aware that we're happy to do that on design codes as the design continues to be evolved. I'd also like to elaborate slightly on the report. What's not clarified is the scale of affordable need. It's thousands upon thousands for Somerset. It's thousands for Mendip. It's hundreds for Frome. And we've got 27 households in Frome at such acute need that they're homeless. These figures are just a snapshot of the bare minimum need as well. That's a static figure. This will get bigger over time. Affordable housing specialists have calculated that 88 additional dwellings per year are required in the town, and 168 if the surrounding parishes are taken into account. We will deliver 510 affordable homes, of which, if we go with the 70%, 357 would be the most acutely needed product, but we're happy to look at that. And that's social rented units, which are essentially 50% of market rates. The remaining housing will be low-cost purchase, making purchase for people who are sat waiting to get on the housing ladder an actual reality in the town. There's a declared housing emergency, but there is no alternative plan to address that. Objectors will generally accept, as they did in a recent ITV News programme, that these households, many of which are families, have a right to be adequately housed. We don't hear from them in arenas like this. They're too intimidated by objectors to turn up and support things like this. However, they have said accommodating them on this site is inappropriate and other sites should be found. I would and do ask regularly, if not this site, then where? Frome is the largest settlement in the area by a considerable margin, and it's the obvious location for significant housing growth that hasn't kept pace with other towns in the area over the past 15 years. If we're serious about dealing with a housing crisis, the only option is to grant planning permissions like this. We've been accused that SGC is unplanned and speculative, but this could not be further from the truth. I've personally worked on this project for 6 years, collecting technical data on which to base a well thought out concept, consulting on that with the local community at public exhibitions, many public meetings, and thoroughly engaging with Frome Town Council and the Parish Council over these many years. If that's unplanned, I don't know what is planned. As a result, this comprehensive development delivers an extensive list of infrastructure, a new primary school and nursery, and contributions to other schools in the town, 2 care homes, a community meeting space, a series of highway improvement works to solve a range of existing problems that even your plan recognises. There is not a plan without SGC to solve, and National Highways back that up. New on and off-site cycle links, electric bikes and scooters, an improved and extended bus service through the town as a whole, electric car club vehicles and spaces throughout the scheme, contributions towards NHS services and facilities. And I've spoken to the GPs repeatedly about that, and we may discuss later. There is a fail-safe about providing some sort of GP or pharmacy space within the scheme. We also provide on-site flood storage mitigation. And I'm not here to defend Wessex Water. I would never do that, or any of the sewerage undertakers. That would be an impossible task. But we've engaged with them throughout the process. We've designed a scheme that they've modelled, but it's out of our hands. They have to maintain the status quo. We have to pay many hundreds of thousands of pounds to them. And there is the ability that we could store foul sewage water within our scheme before it leaves the site. So there is actually a method that could be secured via condition to alleviate the problems that affect the town. We will certainly not be making it worse. We've also got contributions towards new pitches, floodlights, changing rooms for Frome Rugby Club and Frome Town United. We heard from Councillor Tanner that that's not for the town, but they are clearly big clubs in the town. It is benefiting them. And improvements to Frome Town's train station.
Just sort of wind up.
I'm on my last paragraph.
You're over your 3
So
minutes.
the total of the scheme, we're committed over 27 million of new infrastructure in the town. And if you add in the cost of the affordable housing, the investment in the town is 78 million. You simply do not get that through the continuation of unplanned field by field development, which is not the case here. We will be selling phases, not fields. We keep hearing that it's field by field. It's phase by carefully phased phase. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you very much. And you are the last of the public speakers. I'm just going to put something in here a minute. We normally stop at 4 o'clock for a comfort break, but I think we'll wait till 4:30 today, if that's okay.
Excuse me, Chair. Can I
Or
quote-
did,
can I quote with the chin off?
okay, I'm going to take an exceptional decision here. The chap who had the heart condition, if you wish to come back and finish off your little speech, you can have another minute or so. Okay, but don't take advantage.
Neil Brandt, I think.
Yeah, Neil. Yeah, that's it. We can take the comfort break earlier, if you prefer. Yeah, that's okay. So we'll let this gentleman do his talk and then we'll have a comfort break.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I wasn't able to finish, not only because of the time, but I literally ran out of steam. So thank you ever so much. Literally one final paragraph, and it's not as a transport planner. It's as a father of a grown-up family in Frome. Raised my children in Frome. They no longer live in Frome. They've been driven out by the unaffordability of open market housing in the town. And that is the generations we are creating. Selwood Garden makes a positive contribution to changing that for our next generations. So for that aside from the Chancellor Planning, I ask that this be given fair consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Cheers. I think we will actually take the comfort break now for 10 minutes or so. We'll be back before 10 past, please. Okay, so we can start again. Welcome back. We've just had our 10-minute break. First we're going to go to the officers to see if the officers want to come back with anything. And Dawn's already in, so Dawn first.
Thank you. I just wanted to confirm a point that came through from a couple of the speakers in terms of the background of the case officer for this particular application. So we have operated this application with a planning performance agreement. It is a way to manage planning applications. It is a way that we are pursuing for Somerset Local Authority. It is an income generating scheme for the council, but in this case it's cost neutral because there is an external consultant with the required expertise to give the time to this application to ensure due consideration. So in terms of the case officer is being paid by the developer, it's not quite that simple. There is a planning performance agreement, so there is written agreement between the council and the developer, and time is charged on an hourly basis in accordance with that PPA. So there's nothing underhand going on. And for the purpose of the application, he is the case officer representing Somerset Council. So he is representing the recommendation with Somerset Council's blessing and endorsement. So just to clarify that point before we go on to the merits of the application.
Thank you very much for clarifying that, Dawn. I think that's sensible. There have been a couple of comments that needed clarification. Thank you. Does anybody else wish to say any officer? Tom?
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to say something that councillors will. I'll put my volume off, so I don't know. Yeah, it also sound familiar, but a new voice.
Your mobile phone, probably.
Headphones. It's got the volume off. Right. Mine's over there.
You could tell that.
Oh, these. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so this will sound familiar, but a new voice. Slightly. So the term has prematurity has been used. So just want to clear up on that. It's, with an absence of a 5-year housing land supply, we know the terminology used in the NPPF is out of date. So that doesn't mean policies are just thrown away. They're still relevant, but they have less weight. So one of those is a restrictive policy on where housing is, but obviously other policies apply. So there isn't a plan that's in date that you can be premature against. So I just wanted to clarify that. Members of the public, it's very sort of planning technical language, but there isn't a plan against which we're being premature. And the NPPF, as we know, paragraph 11D, because we don't have a 5-year housing land supply, means that applicants can put in planning applications and we will consider them. And what you'd have heard before from officers is that we are advised by the NPPF where there are not significant and demonstrable harm, we ought to be approving applications that are otherwise sustainable without delay. So where officers are bringing to you applications that have no objections from statutory consultees, we're making recommendations for approval, and they come to committee for your scrutiny. So that's all good, and that's all in the public arena. So that's good that that's how it works. But what, in terms of resolving the 5-year housing land shortage, I've got an update from our planning policy colleagues, and I'm just going to read this. I'm glad someone's lying back enjoying what I'm saying.
Excuse me, someone is online with the camera on. Excuse me.
Switch the camera off, yeah.
I obviously have a very relaxing voice. It's gone. So in this context, sorry, there's an update from planning policy teams that so the latest 5-year housing supply statement for Somerset East, 3.68 years, which is a shortfall of
876. This application, we are saying would contribute in years 4 and 5, 50 houses each. I think my colleagues will correct me if I'm wrong on that. That would then take us to a 3.8 year supply, shortfall of 776. We've also had others coming forward in the district that as they move forward, we get to a position where we're getting close to having a 4.5 year supply. So this is how, by permitting developments in that are sustainable and have they're meeting all the requirements in Section 1 to 6, etc., that gets us closer to having a 5-year housing land supply. So hopefully, I know you've heard that before, but I just wanted to be clear about that and then link it into the idea of prematurity. Thank you.
And thank you, Tom. I don't think there's anybody else who wants to talk on the officer front at the moment. No, Gwilym, do you want to say anything?
No, there are a large number of questions and issues raised, but I think if they probably come up in the debate and I can respond to them then.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, I think I know who's got the first hand up, and it's been there. So Helen, fire away.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to start off by just asking some technical questions and making an observation, and then I'd like to hear what everyone else has got to say. But if later in the meeting it looks like it may be moving towards approval, I'd like to come back and ask about some conditions and some extra things later in the meeting. Okay, so to start with, regarding this, the 5-year housing supply, just a quick question about how it's calculated. I do know that the planning policy team go out and look at where the build out rates are, how the build out rates are going with applications that have got full planning permission. So if we approve this today, it's not actually going to suddenly solve our 5-year housing supply as I understand it. We've got to then wait for the reserved matters to come in. And then when they get approval, then it goes into our 5-year housing supply. So I think I've understood that correctly, and I would like someone to confirm that. So that's first of all. Secondly, was there actually a report from the Conservation Officer? Because I think somebody told me that there wasn't. And there is Keyford House, which is actually on Little Keyford Lane, Little Keyford Lane, which is going to have loads of houses in front of it, on the field in front of it. And there's also some listed buildings just back off Little Keyford Lane. So I want to know how how the officer came to the conclusion that it's what's called less than substantial harm. If we haven't actually had a report from the Conservation Officer, is that your personal judgment? Then we've heard a lot about how these things are going to actually be delivered and whether or not the developers will stick to the master plan that's been outlined for us today. And what I'm trying to get my head around is actually what has legal force and what doesn't have legal force. So we've got these 5 parameter plans, but it seems to me that they don't actually have legal force. And then we've got design principles, which is great. And then we've been told that later on, we're going to have more detailed design codes being worked up. But for example, with the green infrastructure plan, which I'm particularly concerned about, how do we know that that's definitely going to be delivered? Because there seems to be different ways of doing this. The way I've understood it is that there'll be an officer that will get a reserved matters application in, and then they'll check it against the parameter plans and the outline permission and see if it's okay. That seems to me to be quite weak, because it might be the officer is more, some officers are, let's say, more thorough than others. It may be that the developer wants to have sorry? In my opinion, yes. In my opinion, yes. I've worked with some officers who have been marvellous and some that have actually allowed things to go through. And I'll give an illustration of that. Thank you if you stop interrupting me. Okay.
Excuse me, folks. Can we? Sorry, I'm speaking on behalf of my chair. Maybe comment should be taken. I'll leave it to you next. Sorry.
Okay. So the other thing I wanted to ask was, when we get to negotiate Section 106, I'd like to support what the town council said, in that I think that the parishes and the town need to be liaised with a bit more on that. And I want to know if there's any scope, so again, it's another legal question, if there's any scope for changing some of those things in that. So for example, there are no 1-bed flats for sale, and yet when people are trying to get on the housing ladder, that is what they want. So I don't know if we can change the housing mix at this stage. So I want to know if that's a possibility. Sorry, going back to my general observation, it is that as you approach Frome, it's actually all on a plateau, and so there is a ridge line, and the river goes through, and that breaks that ridge, that breaks that plateau. So it does go down and then up again in the middle of town. When we agreed for the local plan part 2 allocations, that's 800 in my division that went through and that were built out in the last 5 years. Another 400 or 500 went out the 5 years before that at Edmund Park. This area of town has been built out and built out. All the way through, we have tried to ensure that that ridge line is not disrupted. And I've worked positively with some officers here to ensure that some of the hedgerows are kept at quite a high height so that you don't see from afar, from the AONB or from outside of Frome, you don't see all the houses tumbling down the road, or from Clay Hill, for that matter. So that will, if this goes through, that will undo all of that, unless these parameter plans, for example, the landscaping plans are really, really good. Now, I see that there is quite a lot of greenery and there's extra woodlands planned along Little Keyford Lane, which is great because it means that the highest houses will actually be screened to a certain extent. But I want to know how this is going to be pinned down. And the town council mentioned something called a local delivery vehicle. Right, so I want to know if we can have something like that, that is a really solid document that we can pin all this down properly and get a proper master plan. Then LVA also said something about that they would have a contract with the people who come forward and do reserved matters afterwards. You know, are these two possible routes, or can they work together? I just want to make sure that the vision is actually, if this goes through, that the vision is actually delivered as we see it on paper. Sorry to take so long, but it's all quite technical.
Okay, Helen, thank you. But I just want to bring something up where you made a comment. I think that it should be remembered that all officers work extremely hard under difficult circumstances. Okay? Okay. I think that has to be remembered. Okay. Okay. Willem, I think, or Tom? Tom.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just start on the 5-year housing map supply point and then pass over to Gwilym? My understanding, I'm sure Gwilym will correct me if I'm wrong, is that we have build out rates, a phasing plan that I think is delivering 80 units a year from 2027. So what I said earlier was 50 a year for year 4, year 5 in the 5-year supply, which is big. I was underestimating it to not sound like I was over egging the amount that will be that this would contribute to 5-year supply. But it's outlined, so it's all a matter of, it's about certainty. So outlines granted, we're saying 2 years of 50 would contribute, so it's an additional 100.
So you're guessing the build out rate, basically?
Well, no, the build out rate is set as 80 a year, I understand.
Oh, I see. You're looking at the parameter plan that's at the end of that's got the timetable on it.
And what I'm doing is taking a pessimistic view of it.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, just on.
Thanks, Gwilym. Are you coming in now, Gwilym?
Yeah, sorry, just on that. Yeah, so the first phase. Sorry. So the over the 15-year period to deliver the 1,700 homes, they're assuming a total of 130 a year. However, that comes in a series of phases. So to begin with, they're suggesting potentially 80, I think it's 81 homes for the first couple of years. Then phase 2 will overlap. So you'll get an increase instead of that comes in, I think, at 60 per year. So you'll get a build up of houses. So the precise number, I think adopting the 50 as a kind of a conservative number is not unreasonable. It will take time to get things going. So for the first 2 years, I think that's not an unreasonable approach.
Thank you, Gwilym. Helen, are you happy now?
No, I asked quite a lot of technical and legal questions about how if this goes ahead, how we can make sure it's delivered, and whether we had a report from the conservation officer.
Yeah,
thank you.
So in terms of the conservation officer, they were consulted. They didn't respond. The opinion in the committee report is my professional judgment, not a personal one. Professional judgment based on experience in World Heritage Cities, like Bath and other locations dealing with proposals affecting listed buildings. So I'm confident in the judgments which are expressed in the report. In terms of, you think you said sticking to the master plan and actually delivering what's there. In terms of the green infrastructure plan, that is linked to the bat mitigation strategy, and Natural England and the Somerset Ecology Services have been very clear that that needs to be locked into the future development of the site. And so there's a whole series of details within that which are required in order to mitigate the impact on the MELS special area of conservation. So in that sense, there is not just a case of a parameter plan which will get changed. That is locked in through the mitigation relating to bat. So it's more than just one measure of control. In terms of what's actually what has legal force. So it is the parameter plans plus the design principles framework document are the documents which would be, if this application is approved, would be locked in at this stage. So it's not just the parameter plans, which when you look at them are slightly kind of disembodied because they're just different uses and building heights, etc. Design principles document takes that a step further, and there are then design codes which will take that to a more detailed level, and that would be controlled by condition. So there's a series of measures. We're getting, in my opinion, additional control at this stage through the design principles document, and then design codes will actually be worked up, and so that's how it will come forward. And that would need to be submitted prior to any reserve matters applications, and so that would again say that they would have to be in conformity with those documents. So again, there's another layer of control, if you want to put it that way. In terms of the housing mix, that is an indicative mix at the moment. It's not, and that will, in terms of the affordable homes, that will be progressed through the Section 106 agreement, and to agree there will be a schedule. And I know it came up this morning in terms of there'll be a plan, there will be a schedule in terms of the provision of affordable housing, and it will be delivered per reserve matter and per phase, rather than all being kind of back-ended at the end of the development. The affordable housing would come in on a phase-by-phase basis. In terms of not breaking the ridgeline, the parameter plans have been adjusted in order to keep lower buildings towards the outer edge of the site, so the Marston Road and the road linking from Little Keyford Lane down to Blacksbridge Road B3092, and they have been pulled away and from that hedge line, and there's a green buffer, existing hedge line, green buffer, and the lower buildings along that edge in order to manage that potential impact of that ridge line. And obviously, well, not obviously, but slightly further up the hill, you've got the FR3A sites, which are already being implemented. They're actually slightly further up the hill than the location of housing on this application site. So in terms of the assessment, I think there's measures both in the parameters and the layout which will deal with that issue of breaking that ridge line. In terms of a proper master plan, there is an illustrative master plan, and it was specifically not being included as or be recommended as an approved document at this stage because it assumes a certain layout, and the things like it assumes a certain number of hedges would have to be removed in order to deliver that layout. And the council was very clear that the starting point here is the hedgerows and the trees and the field patterns, rather than just imposing, in inverted commas, a layout onto that. So that's why it's not been approved. But there are various documents you see in terms of the conditions relating to things like site-wide strategic master plans, etc., in order to be able to set things up long term. But the combination of the parameter plans and design principles and framework provides an appropriate and robust basis on which to progress should this scheme get approved.
Okay, thank you, Gwilym. And I think Floors is next.
Thank you. Rather like Helen, I've got some technical questions and I may come back. First of all, on affordable housing, I'm very aware that we have a local plan and it is 80% of the, it's 30% of all housing, and not the 30%, 80% should be social housing, social rent. I'm aware that the government is, dare I say, not arbitrarily, but dropping bits of information all the time. And we need to actually, get briefed on them as they come out, because it is very frustrating to understand. So I'm delighted the developer has said 80% of the affordable housing allocation will be social rent, because I see this application in terms of what I've seen for some years now is that Frome, in fact, Frome Town Council have declared housing emergency, and we do need to think about not just housing, but actually the social rent element of it. So perhaps you could clarify whether it's 70 or 80, but that's maybe a policy thing which is emerging, and you may need to brief us in some way. The second question I have is that I am concerned that the transport assessment is 2019, which is pre-COVID, and I would like to understand how that's been updated, because I know during COVID and immediately post-COVID, how transport numbers fell off, but they're now coming back. So perhaps you could explain what assumptions have been made around that, and I think that would be really helpful. The third thing was that I'm interested in the design code, and one of the illustrative pictures was something I feel strongly about, and that is storage for bins and bikes. And I happened to see that on one of your slides. And is that actually being translated into something which it can be a material consideration in the design code? Because at the moment we do not see enough bins and bike storage, particularly given bikes are so expensive. So I was particularly pleased to see that. So those are my three questions. One about affordable housing, secondly about the transport design, and thirdly about the design code and specifically bikes and bins.
Thank you. I think that's Gwilym, that's you.
Okay, in terms of the affordable housing, yes, the policy is 30% and 80-20 social rent to intermediate, and the applicants have said that they would provide that. The report does refer to what's called first homes, which is let's call it the current National Planning Policy Framework refers to first homes, and plus the ministerial statement. The current government is looking to drop the first homes. So the application when it came in was considered against the first homes policy, and that's why it had 67% affordable and first homes, etc. Given the likely change, we're looking to provide social rent, and as the applicant has said today, that would be 80%, so that would be fully policy compliant. On the transport assessment, Emma,
Thank you very much. The transport assessment, yes, originally 2019 with a 2011 census. The 2021 census very obviously would have been a very skewed opinion of travel behaviours, with vast majority of people working from home where possible. However, that census has actually been considered subsequently, and the 2019 with 2011 census data was obviously a worst case scenario compared to the later data. Sorry, I didn't mean to put those two words next to each other. But with the data being obviously very skewed by COVID, so it is considered to be a robust transport assessment.
For clarity, what you're saying is that the assumptions made in the transport assessment which drives these numbers is a worst case scenario, because you haven't got enough data to know how many people are working from home or whatever. Am I misreading your statement?
I wouldn't necessarily say misreading. I possibly didn't explain as thoroughly as I could have done, because the latest data from the census about working from home, etc., is the 2021 data, which is very skewed. It is not considered from a transport perspective to be a robust set of data.
Okay.
So therefore, we have to rely on the 2011 data to be more robust. You're right. Just pre-COVID and just post-COVID, there was a very much a peak and trough effect. We are now considered to be in pre-COVID territory, so that again, that 2019 data is correct. The transport assessment in 2019 included future growth, so any committed development around the area, so the local plan committed sites would have been considered in that future growth on top of current base model.
Yeah.
And then on top of that would be the Selwood data.
Okay, so you can assure us that the numbers are predicated on a 2011 adjusted for known growth.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And then the third question around the design code and bins and bikes.
As far as bins and bikes are concerned, I can take that side of it. Bin storage and bicycle storage, particularly the bicycle storage, forms part of the parking strategy for Somerset Council. Every dwelling would be required to provide cycle storage of 1 per bedroom. And there is pushback if that is included within garaging.
Okay, because I'm just concerned that last month we saw an application with no reference whatsoever to bins and bikes. So is it policy or isn't it? Or what are we doing on that? I'm a bit confused here.
Who would like to answer that one? Because it's important. Dawn.
Thank you. I don't mind coming in. The parking strategy is an adopted strategy that the Highway Authority use to inform their comments back to the planning officers. So it's not quite adopted policy like local plan, but it is adopted guidance. So it does hold weight. And when it comes from highways, it is taken into account as part of planning applications.
I'm delighted to see it. My understanding that there was statutory advice, full stop, was the only guidance on the previous application. Maybe we'll take it offline, but there seems to be a gap, if colleagues remember at the last meeting, where we had no indication at all that they had made any comment whatsoever on bike storage.
Okay, thank you, Ros. Yeah, you want to come back, Emma?
It is noted from the Highway Authority point of view that often drawings are submitted that don't show cycle storage, and that might be what you're referring to. Apologies if I'm putting thoughts into your head. Often at that point, we do condition that details of the cycle storage are provided prior to commencement.
Okay, so we're looking for specific condition in that area. Okay, thank you.
Okay, everybody's happy now there. So we move on to Claire.
Thank you, Chair. So we've been presented with a vision from the applicant, a community vision. But does the vision have buy-in from the community? Why is this relevant? Why is it relevant to me? Because I think Frome knows all about realising its vision. And years ago, I think it was about 2009, Catherine Hill traders, they wanted to increase footfall on the hill. There wasn't even signage at the bottom. And they set up a small artisan market, and the vision for an artisan market had buy-in, and the rest is history, economic regeneration, footfall. Everyone's heard about this vibrant area, the town, the people, and people are proud of the place. I know there's also challenges with it, but we've all heard of Frome. The whole country, I think, has heard of Frome. I think that planning, it's linked, the vision, because planning is underpinned by an economic objective and a social objective. So realising a vision, transforming it to an economic objective and a social objective, and that's what planning should do. But so I see a gaping hole filled with risks and a need for assurances. Delivering this vision is that where the gaping hole fits. Will it get delivered? Frome is an active, engaged, creative community. We've got to listen, and the community has to drive its destiny. The vision for this plan is a community vision. The two are linked. The community and many stakeholders today have presented legal and material reasons why they brought their hearts and their hopes here. I have doubts about this application. I have severe doubts about this application, that it's right. Is it too big, too risky, too greedy? We have a housing emergency, but is this the right solution? Is it the right scale? Can we guarantee that the parcels that developers will take on in the future won't introduce mission and vision creep? And my question is, the phases that have been presented to us, is that a phase for a developer to take on per phase, or is it a number of developers? And how do we deliver the vision that the wonderful vision that you're setting out in the plans? And how are you going to get the community to buy in? This is something that should be benefiting the community. That's my questions. Thank you.
Okay, who wants to take that one?
If I start,
Right.
in terms of the vision, it's the applicant's vision, not my vision, just to be clear.
That's what I mean. It's
Sorry, thank you. So the way the application has been put together and the requirements the council has put on it in terms of things like producing the design document, which wasn't part of the original application. They just said, oh, well, here's the parameter plans and here's the design and access statement, which has no formal status, and we'll get to a good scheme. Actually, we went and said, no, you need to produce this interim kind of stepping stone document in order to lock in that vision into the scheme. And so that is, and they agreed to do that, and they produced what is quite a lengthy document set to actually go beyond just the parameter plans. So in terms of actually the process side of things, then that is, in my view, a very good start in terms of developing further design codes. In terms of actually delivering some of the detail of the scheme, then there are a number of the elements which will be secured through planning obligations, Section 106 agreement. And I know there has been scepticism expressed by members of the public and people objecting to the application and others about whether, the school, for example, will it be delivered. There is the scale of the development requires the delivery of a school, and education have been very clear that it needs to be provided and on the site rather than on a remote site. And so that would be part of the Section 106 agreement, including triggers for that as to when it comes forward. The way that the scheme would come forward is actually phase one. There is capacity within Frome in the short term to accommodate primary age children, but by phase two, there would need to be a school in place. And so the programme, we'd need to make sure that timing wise, because it takes probably, it might take a year to get the reserve matters approved, a year to get the, to build the school, and it needs to be opened in the autumn rather than, another time. So that would have to be, we have to work out the triggers for that. And that's something which would be secured in the 106 agreement. So I think there's a number of different mechanisms which would help secure delivering the vision within the proposal. In terms of the other point you made was about, is it a phase per developer? That's not being prescribed, but each reserve matters would relate to a phase of the development. That might involve more than one developer, but they would need to be working in the context of the design principles document, the parameter plans, and the design codes. So even if there's more than one developer, that there are mechanisms in place to manage that process.
Okay, thanks, Gwilym. And are you happy, Claire, with that reply?
I'm never happy.
Oh, no, that's all right. Cheers. Thank you. Right, I think Martin D is next.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to thank the members of the public that came here today, because I haven't heard such erudite, informed and well-delivered presentations in this room. I thought it was exceptional. I've got two questions I'd like to ask in terms of transport and highways, one at a time. I read in the report that it was deemed that there was no necessity for any intervention on the A362, 361 junction. Is that correct? That's the Warminster Road from the bypass.
The Rodden Down junction, as it's yeah.
I'm sorry, I haven't got the paper to give you the reference.
No, it's fine. There is a recognised issue, which does result in very tragic accidents along the A361. It is recognised, and as a council, we do take our commitment to safety very seriously. We are working very hard with the police to develop schemes for a safety improvement along the A361, 362 and the 361 generally going to the south of the site. What does need to be said is that those issues are existing issues. Yes, there will be additional traffic being brought to the area by the development, but the issues are existing issues. I believe that if we were to approach the developers, they may be willing to put some money towards the feasibility study, or certainly we could ask the question, towards the feasibility study of those safety improvements, but those safety improvements are at early stages, unfortunately.
Can I just come back on that? That's it says in the report, I've been handed the report, so the traffic effect would be negligible when approaching that junction from what will eventually be 6,000 people, 4,000 extra cars. So I think that needs to be considered urgently. I mean, I would point out to the committee that the Frome bypass, which is the essential artery for this estate, the Frome bypass has had, either approaching it or on it, 7 fatalities in about the last 12 to 14 months, I believe. Certainly in 23, 24, that's about 33% of all fatalities in the whole of Somerset. And this has not been mentioned in this context. And this road needs it's been mentioned by one of the speakers, desperately needs revising. And if this is passed today, it has to be an essential part of that revision. The other thing is, the question is, have we not adopted the National Highway? Have we not reconsidered the most recent National Highways recommendations? Did I get that right?
Sorry, but in terms of the National Highways recommendation, they have issued, or for a while now, there's been in place what's called a holding recommendation, which is if the council is going to approve the application, then it would have to be referred to Secretary of State. Well, that would have to happen anyhow because it's a departure from the plan. In terms of their latest comments, they're saying that in terms of the A36 junctions, this is where that's where their responsibilities lie, is that the mitigation scheme is acceptable. It deals with the issues of traffic from SGC development and also other growth, other sites within the Frome area. And that's what policy DP27 is specifically aimed at dealing with. So they've said the scheme is acceptable and maintaining the performance of those junctions has been demonstrated. It was the wording of a condition which is basically in the back of the report, conditions 35, 36, 37, I think, relate to the delivery of those improvements. And they have come back with some slightly different wording. And that's the only difference, but it's achieved the same effect. Hopefully I've understood.
Okay, thank you. I would like to come back later, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Certainly can, Martin, no problem. We've got Adam down for next.
Thank you, Chair. It's quite overwhelming, this. I think we can hopefully all agree that. It's a lot of issues, a lot of objections on a lot of issues, a lot of rebuttals in the report, a lot of rebuttals from the developers, and there's just so many big issues at stake here, and this is the future of Frome is in our hands this afternoon, it seems. And there's several issues I'm not comfortable with. I know that some issues have been sort of done to death a bit in the report. There's over 100 pages. There's 600 objections. I've tried to keep up with everything, but there's still some questions I've got. one is what does this mean for the local plan? And the call for sites is due in the next, due this month, I think, for the Somerset local plan. What does it mean in actual reality for that? Does it mean that there's less sites are needed for the future? Does it affect the local plan in any way at all? I know the report talks about you can't say it's prejudicial or it's predetermining that. Another question is, there's been talk about the medical facility, potential to have a medical facility on site for the local residents there. It's a long way, it's a drive, potentially a long bus route to the Frome Medical Centre, which has 2 surgeries. The local NHS council committee board says we don't need any more capacity, but they have the capacity to cope with primary care arising from 4,000 residents at this site. But I'm not sure that that's the case. That's not the lived experience of people in Frome, because sometimes you get an excellent service and sometimes you don't get any service because the capacity isn't there to take the number of patients that phone up each day. It just isn't there. So can we look into that a bit more to find out a way of securing a medical facility or a place for people to go and be seen on site? Because it is a long way. Every other service is saying they want a contribution, but that it just sticks out as an anomaly. The traffic impact is going to be it's predicted to be quite major, quite severe on several junctions all around the south and west of Frome. That's in the reports from the applicants. And some of those junctions have mitigation measures, and some of them have Section 106 with contributions. My main concern of that is, like Martin just said, the A361, A362 junction, which the applicant's own report says will have a 13% change in traffic. I'm not sure if that's still precisely the case, but because it may have been updated, but 13%, when the Beckington junctions have about 5%, I think, impact, and they're attracting £4 million funding to widen the lanes, but yet the A361, 362 junction is attracting 13% more traffic, and there's no mitigation whatsoever for that. And there's talk in the report of it being an existing problem. Well, that's the same as every other junction is an existing problem, which this development would add traffic to. So I wouldn't be happy to give this permission with a 13%, with an impact on a junction and a bypass with an existing safety problem, which this will add to, no doubt, when there's no mitigation plan for that junction. That's almost a red line for me, having heard all this, without a mitigation plan being committed to or in place. So can we do that? Can we have that? There's also the other impacts that Selwood Parish Council have argued and had on the screen. There's the access to the business park. There's a Little Keeford Lane bus route of an issue. How are we going to address those? How do we respond to those points that they've so eloquently made? My final set of points is the environmental impact. There's been an environmental statement and an addendum updated. Several issues only. I think not. I don't think the environmental statement is actually complete in some respects. There's no impacts on climate in the environmental statement. I can't find anything. The impact on archaeology hasn't been surveyed. So can we require a survey? Because there's a death study, but no survey. There's impacts that could be major. It could be a major impact that the ES actually says, but we don't know what on because there's been no survey of the actual assets that could be under the ground. It's deferred to a condition, which is actually in some respects could be unlawful in light of EIA case law, like the Hardy case. And who took the Hardy case? Charlie Hopkins, and some of the people that will know him. There's also the climate. There's the Finch and the Cumbria cases, which require an assessment of a major application which has implications for greenhouse gas emissions. There's been no assessment of that for this application in the environmental statement, that is. And contaminated land is, again, no survey. It's death study. You can't rule it. It says you can't rule out significant levels of contamination, especially around the landfill site, historic landfill site to the south. So there's been no phase 2 actual site survey. I think the ES needs to include that information to be safe from challenge. Some of the ecological surveys may be more than 3 years out of date now. That's against guidance in SAIEM's guidance as well. So I've got concerns about relatively peripheral environmental impacts, but they are still, it all needs to be there. And for us to approve this first time, at the first time of hearing, it's a big ask for me when I've got so many concerns still. So maybe there's a list of things we want to find more information on. But so hopefully we can address some of those points.
Excuse me again, Adam. There's somebody appeared online. They've gone again. I was just going to highlight it to Debbie. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Adam. I think Emma wants to come in first. Okay. And then Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry about the paper. Coming back on a couple of the issues mentioned by Councillor Dimery and obviously now by Councillor Boyden as well. The A361, 362 works are not required, in the opinion of the Highway Authority, to make the Selwood Garden site a suitable site. It is not to say that they are not desired, but they are not required as a safety issue for this site. The accident record for the A361 between January 2023 and the end of August 2024, so a 20-month period, there are a total of 13 collisions along the A361 from the Marston Road roundabout up to the Berkeley roundabout. Of those incidents, and these are incidents where casualties are reported. These are the only incidents that we get told about. We don't get told if it's just a bumper to bumper. But of those incidents, there were 20 casualties, 4 of which were very sadly fatalities, 2 serious injuries and 14 slight injuries. The 2 main causation factors on the route were shunt impacts, so rear impacts, and the injudicious emergence from junctions. Inappropriate or excessive speed was only listed as having a causal link for one of the collisions. Drivers and casualties in the 25 to 39 age group were overrepresented. And I could tell you what day of the week is more likely to have accidents. But with those figures and the information, the A361, 362 is obviously an area that, as a highway department, we are keen to address, but it is not required as part of this Selwood scheme. Moving on to the issues raised, if I may, Mr. Chairman, sorry, regarding the access for the business park. Whilst consideration has been given to the alternative access through the main site, through the new roundabout on the A361, to do so would take industrial traffic through residential, close to school, etc. There would be higher concerns regarding highway safety taking them in through the main entrance than there would be going off B3092. The climbing lane issue, the presentation very nicely put together by Mr. Hammonds. The wording isn't actually factually correct. On CD 109, section 7.1 of the Design Manual for Roads and Bridges, it doesn't say that a incline of 2% requires a climbing lane. It says that where it is required, and that tends to be from radiating from quarries. So therefore, the area on the A361, known locally as a ski slope, as far as the Highway Authority is concerned, does not require a climbing lane. Therefore, it's not a necessity to have one. And the bus route through Little Keyford Lane, I think that's the last point currently that's kind of semi-aimed at highways. So the bus route through Little Keyford Lane, it does not go all the way down Little Keyford Lane. It stops kind of near the end of Sandys Hill Lane and then goes up towards the B3092 junction, which I accept there are cars parked along, but at no point along that element where the cars are parked is it too narrow for a bus to go through. There is a narrow wing, which will be sent, is currently put forward as a priority one-way section. Once it enters the site, it goes a different route. It leaves Little Keyford Lane and it goes into the site, at which point, shortly afterwards, on the current scheme, which will be a determining factor for the internal layout from the Highways Department, that there is a bus gate. So you cannot use that access as a non-bus or cyclist. I think that covers most of the points, but I think Councillor Dimery's got a
point of information. Yeah, I just want to stress, I specifically said 7 fatalities on or approaching Boat 361. I think there were 3 nearby approaching, but that's a technicality, and thank you for your info.
Okay, thank you both. I think Tom wishes to come in now.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Boyden asked about the implications for the local plan. So any applications that are granted planning permission then become, they're often termed a commitment in the local plan, so an allocation, and they will, to get a local plan adopted, the inspectorate will need us to demonstrate that thing again, 5-year housing land supply. If we can't demonstrate that in a local plan, it won't get adopted. So sites like this, where they've been, would contribute to that, to help plan get adopted. There will be other sites needed, but this would be another site that contributes to that overall supply. It's a step closer to having a 5-year housing land supply, both now and in the future. I don't like to think about that. We're not far from a new MPPF, so we do need to be mindful of that. It will help in appeals now and getting the local plan adopted if the council is approving well planned, whether you think this is well planned or not, that's your view, but well planned permissions, delivering supply helps us win appeals where we're saying we don't like this one. Hopefully that's helpful.
Okay, thanks, Tom. You can move on to Barry.
Well, yeah.
Gwilym.
Yeah, sorry, there's a few questions. Some related to the environmental statement and also the medical facilities and capacity. We have, and the applicant has approached the Frome Medical Centre on a number of occasions about whether they, require additional space. The issue, as I understand it, is it's not about the physical space; it's actually GPs. Rather than that's a kind of a revenue funding issue, which is, and that GP surgeries are now businesses. So in terms of actually the physical space, that's not required. However, we have been liaising with the applicant about having basically through the 106 have a review mechanism so that in a future period, sometime in the future, see whether there's a need for a medical facility and actually ensuring that can be accommodated within some of the commercial space on the site. And they have confirmed that they'd be willing to commit to that. So that there would actually, and potentially including a financial contribution if there is required for a satellite consulting room, for example, or some such. So in terms of actually providing something on site, that is something which can be secured through the 106. In terms of the environmental statement, and you raised a number of items like climate change, that is included within the ES. The requirements of the EIA regulations, the environmental impact assessment regulations, do not require a standalone chapter for each topic. It identifies items to be considered, and that is considered within the socioeconomic chapter of the environmental statement, and that looks at construction impacts and also operational impacts, and that is covered in the report as well. In terms of archaeology, the approach of having a desk-based assessment followed up by investigation, which is what is being proposed, that's a very standard approach on things rather than doing full site investigation in advance. So that has happened on a number of sites within Frome. So again, in my opinion, that is covered appropriately. Contaminated land, there is a reference to contaminated land, and there are conditions proposed to deal with that in going forward. There's a couple, that's probably 3 conditions relating to the assessment of the site. So, in my opinion, the ES is robust, and there is sufficient information on which the council can determine the application. I think that was
okay. That was everything you wanted to say, Gwilym, at the moment. Okay, so now we can move to Barry.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm tempted to speak because of something that Claire said earlier on, and I just want to amplify on her point, which was we've got this vision, from somebody who's very keen to make money. But I don't think we have particularly any way of implementing that vision. We've got 500 objectors on the Mendip website, and I've had another 100 to my email box this week, just this week and the end of last week. That's 600 people, and I have yet to see one email from anybody that says, this is a really good idea. This is going to do us a lot of good. I'm not going to go over the specific details in the objection, like sewage, flooding, traffic, lack of jobs. They're very well known. What is of note is the number of people who care about the countryside. 500 on the website, 100 to my mailbox. Whether their concerns are archaeology, nature reserve, retaining country lanes, loss of crops from the land which will be built over. Providing allotments on this site, just a very small example, ticks a sustainability box. That's really good. When you work it out, it's 1.6 square yards of allotment per house. I think it's enough to grow 2 cauliflowers just about. It's certainly not a row of beans, is it? So there's some sustainability there. Archaeologists, they're concerned that it's not just about digging a trench here and there. Now, I saw on one of the plans earlier on from the presentation, there was a couple of little marks in what was originally a deer park. Archaeologists want to explore that properly. And I am speaking on behalf of somebody who asked me to make the point. It's not about digging little trenches here and there. It's about exploring the whole history and the archaeology of what was a big deer park. And there are still deer roaming around there now, so I'm told. I mean, I've not seen them, but I'm told they're there. Residents see the local lanes being used by traffic based on out-of-date information, or largely out-of-date information. They're no longer able to safely walk down those lanes. There's traffic coming from another 1,700 houses. Now, I think Adam quoted 4,000 cars, but there's a lot of cars to be going up and down there. And even with those much desired bicycles that we think everybody's going to get onto and ride into town and do their shopping, if all 1,700 bicycles went into town on a Saturday morning, I mean, Edric's a cyclist, he'll tell you what chaos that would cause. It'd be awful. Now, Trillox Hill, they abut the nature reserve that's proposed on the other side of the A361. They're very concerned because they can see that that is going to fall into disrepute, it's going to fall into disrepair, and believe it would quickly become disused. And it'd be used for fly tipping, it'd be used for rubbish, it'd be used for all sorts. This and the hedge management proposal, which I have talked to one of the planners before we had our site visit, I just don't see it's ever going to happen. Nobody is going to look after hedges and nature reserves in perpetuity. And if they promise that they will, I think you should view that with some suspicion. I mean, let's see if these 600 objectors have really got it wrong, though, about this proposal. We've already had a backtracking on the all-weather sports field. What was going to be all-weather sports field is now going to be a grass field and probably unusable through most of the winter because it's going to be located in the parts of the field that's the boggiest. So that's backtracking number 1. We haven't even started yet. Sports England have objected to that. I think somebody mentioned that Royal United Hospital have objected to it because they do not see that in the future years they're going to be able to develop with cope with the cases that are developed on this site of 1,700 houses. Cranbourne Chase AO&B have objected. CPRE have objected. Historic England has got concerns, and schools and doctors will all be under pressure. Nobody can look at these plans today, and I think this is Claire's point, and guarantee that this is how it will be in 15 years' time. I just do not believe it, not least because they're only working to an illustrative plan. Now, incidentally, if you want a horror picture on Somerset Live today, there is a copy of that illustrative plan, but it's a perspective view. And they've chosen a very bad one. If I was the developer, I'd be on the phone to them and say, get that off the website. It looks like a Victorian mill town. It's horrendous. Not many of you will have heard of Melrose and Advent, but you certainly will have heard of Craft and Bloor Homes. These companies all promised great things at their application stages. As soon as their deals were approved, they all backtracked, with great damage to the Cadbury, Cobham and GKN companies. I'm not making this up, it's all in the press. Nearer to home, in the Bloor case, the promised school at Tadley Acres was never built. And earlier this year, Somerset Council quietly approved a capital scheme in excess of £500,000 to provide extra classrooms at St Paul's School. If Mendip Council had made Bloor Homes stick to the conditions on their planning application, that school would have been built and the money would not have come out of our pockets now. So there's a prime example that people must be made to keep their conditions. Let me give you one last example, please, Chair. I'm going on a bit, but let me just give you this example. Things that are shown on the illustrative master plan, I do not think can be conditioned, and the LVA can't be made to stick to them. There's a wind turbine up by Warren Farm, up by the golf course at Mendip. There was a very small turbine put up there. It was a 15 kilowatt. It's probably as tall as this room. They then thought, this is a jolly good idea. We'll build a great big one. So the planning at Mendip said you can build the big one, make the application, but the condition of planning is you must take the small one down before you commission the big one. So when I went to Mendip about a year later and said there's 2 wind turbines running up there, I thought they were conditioned that one had to be taken down before they could build the other. Mendip said, well, they put in a planning application and we just cannot condition them. So you can put all these conditions onto these bits of paper and they don't have to take any notice, and they just employ cleverer people than we have got and they'll ignore them. So if conditions to get things done cannot be immutable, the only way to get all the infrastructure in place and all these nice promised things of community centres, sports ground, this, that and the other, is to put them in at the beginning. And then there can be no backtracking. And I know they will say, well, we can't afford to put them in at the beginning. We're only going to build 150 houses the first year. But if you don't put them in at the beginning, I guarantee you will not get them at the end. Because LVA would have quickly sold off all this site in bits, in parcels, job lots. I don't know what they're going to do with it. But what you are going to get at the end is not what you thought we were going to get. I believe these objectors have all got genuine and reasonable worries for the future for what I see as a very unsatisfactory project. Thank you, Chair.
And thank you, Barry. Very good. Helen, you're coming now.
Right, thank you, Chair. As people have been talking, I've got a couple of other things that have come up. I think that the Town Council said that when they agreed to take one of the sports pitches away from the floodplain, they're going to instead provide amenities for the town at the Royal Football Club or whatever. The Frome Town Council was not consulted, and there hasn't actually been a needs analysis of the sports facilities that are needed in the town. So they need to be included. And again, this goes back to involving Frome Town Council and Selwood Parish Council with the Section 106 agreements. The other thing was about the infrastructure plan for sewage, and Gwilym will know that I've already raised this with him. The site is got very low infiltration rates. SUDS doesn't really work. So and there are 2 springs. So it's going to be very wet, and I believe there's something like I don't know, 6 almost permanently wet attenuation tanks and something like another 20 that will only be filled up when it rains a lot and will be dry the rest of the time. It is a problem with flooding. We've got to acknowledge that downstream, and everybody's worried that it's going to make the flooding problem worse. So that absolutely needs to be watertight. But what I'm more concerned about really is the infrastructure plan for sewage. So what we've got at the moment is an illustrative plan, what you sent Grinham sent it just to me. It's like an illustrative plan of how the infrastructure plan for sewage might work out. But it's not actually one of the conditions, I don't think, or one of the things that's definitely going to happen. And I believe that the correspondence with Wessex Water is, it seems to be that we're falling between two stools, that Wessex Water is saying, you need to do a plan, and we're saying to Essex Water, we want your plan, and nobody's we haven't actually, it seems to be falling down between two stools. We still haven't got a plan from Wessex Water about how this extra sewage is going to be coped with. At the moment, the other applications I told you about in my division, they're just on the top of the hill. It's just coming down into the valley of Frome. And the plan is that all the sewage goes down by gravity to the bottom of the hill. There's tanks underground where it gets collected, and then it gets pumped back up the hill to go to the industrial estate, where there's a really big sewer. It joins the main sewer under the industrial estate, then gets pumped all the way around town. So remember, this development's on the south side of the sewage works are on the north side of town. So I believe that that's the same system that's proposed for Selwood Garden community. And I'm just concerned that that's going to overload our sewage system. And as the gentleman, Jim Dowling from Selwood Parish Council said, that we're already getting all these overflows. I would like to see a proper plan from Wessex Water about addressing those problems in Frome, but how we're not looking at the cumulative impacts of anything really, but sewage in particular, we need to be looking at the cumulative impacts, and we need to get that plan up front from Wessex Water, not just an indicative plan. So I think that's an extra condition that needs to go in. It might even be a reason for deferral. I also wanted to ask about the economic and commercial space that's down by the river. We got a sort of glossy marketing thing from LVA a few days ago, which said on page 2, I think, 765 jobs will be created, and that doesn't include the construction jobs. I want to know how those 765 jobs are going to be created. I think the plan is that you have some space and say, here you are, commerce and business and industry, come along here and locate here. And perhaps that's a prediction that 765 jobs will be created from that development down there. But we don't have a kind of, is there an economic strategy that goes with this? Is there a way of promoting that land so that people do come in and provide employment? Because at the moment, the whole thing is plainly not sustainable, because it's predicted that 60% of the people that live there are going to go out along the A36. That's why the A36 is getting £4.3 million, right? It's because they're all going to go off on the A36 towards Bath, Bristol and Trowbridge. So how do we keep people in? So the kind of people that are going to buy those properties, and bear in mind that at the moment, something like, I calculated that 62% of all the houses to be built will be 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom, 5-bedroom. So they're going to be aimed at families, really, I think, or people with more money. So those people, it's predicted they're going to be going somewhere else. How can we keep them? Is there a sort of strategy that somehow we can create business hubs in Frome down there that will keep people there? Because if we don't, and we just have big warehouses that are like, warehouses like Moore Homebase or whatever, what you'll find is you'll actually have people commuting into Frome to go and work there. It won't necessarily be the people that live in the housing next door. So I think we might have a double problem here, not just people commuting out and back, but also people commuting in to work in those areas. So I'm a bit concerned about the economic strategy. I've got so many more things to say, but I think I better leave it there because okay, I'll come back. Thank you.
You're finished for a moment, Helen, so we're going to Claire.
Hang on, I was next.
Oh, you're next. Sorry, Edric, you're on the list, Claire.
I would like some answers, please.
Okay, we'll get you some answers first.
Okay. In terms of the, you mentioned the sports provision, and there's also a reference from Councillor Clark about they're already backtracking on the provision. Sports England looked at sports provision across Frome, and they first of all did not support the provision of sports pitches within the floodplain or areas which could potentially flood. And in order to deal with that and provide an all-weather pitch, you'd actually have to do engineering works within the floodplain. And that's something which was not being encouraged by the council in terms of actually the works there. Therefore, we said, OK, look at alternative provision off-site, which would serve the wider Frome community. And that's why the two locations for football and rugby have been identified. And that was in liaison with Sport England. So it's not backtracking. It's the fact that in order to not undertake significant engineering works in the floodplain, which might impact on flooding. Therefore, that's why they were located off-site. In terms of the foul water sewage, yes, the what you've described in terms of there are the storage on the site, and then it is pumped across to Inox Hill, whatever you want to call it, the existing waterworks there. There is the potential to have additional capacity on the site in order to hold back, so you don't just get, the storm or surge flows going straight through to the treatment works, and that's something in terms of the capacity which could be incorporated within the development. So there's that can be looked at. In terms of being indicative, it's kind of slightly kind of chicken and egg or whatever in terms of being able to plan it, because the what they have identified is this is how it could be provided, and the critical thing is that there is capacity on site to hold sewage and then have that pumped on, and that is something which then would be worked up with Wessex Water as part of the next stage of the development or the proposals. And there is a condition 2 which relates to the site-wide infrastructure plan. So there is an in-principle approach, which is the indicative one, which has been submitted. I sent it to you. It is available on the website. It's not something exclusive to Councillor Kay. So it is within the flood risk assessment that where I drew that document. So it is a public document. In terms of flooding, there is surface water drainage, and I had the diagram in the plan which showed there are the existing channels. Actually, the runoff rate as it is at the moment would, if you just did nothing, would actually be greater than the discharge rate which has been built into the surface water drainage strategy. So actually, that would manage the flow from the site and then into the River Frome or wherever it's going to go. So that there is actually capacity in effect being built in there. In terms of the commercial space and out commuting, Frome is relatively self-contained. There's lots of commuting in and out of towns all over some of the country. Frome has the benefit of having a train station which does connect with other places, so it doesn't have to be by car, although I do appreciate that people do get in their car to go to work. And actually the provision of the space there could accommodate businesses from Frome relocating or new business coming on into the site. At the moment, there isn't a specific requirement as to where those businesses would come from.
Okay, can I just quickly come back on one thing that, a few, regarding the sports facilities. Yeah. The rugby club and the football ground, the rugby club in particular is the other side of town. So it's going to involve travel. Basically, people are going to get in their cars to do that. So that's the first thing. Secondly, I'm not convinced about the sewage plan still, I'm afraid. You say it's in principle approved and it will be built out as each reserve matters stage comes in. But I still would like to see an overall plan somehow sort of pinned down, a bit like what I was saying about the parameter plans, like an infrastructure plan pinned down. And I wonder if that's something we could put in as a condition. The other thing, what you're saying about Frome being quite sustainable, I would just argue with that is that we've got something like 6 trains every morning that go to Bath and Bristol, and there are 2 or 3 carriages, and there's always standing room only. And most people get in their cars and go to Bath and Bristol. They don't actually get the train. And the walking distance from the middle of this site, it will be about 40 minutes. So I just don't think people, and there's also, you talked earlier about a modal shift. You said something about, I've seen the figures about, somebody put up something about a modal shift. It's assumed that more than 10% of people will be, there's going to be 10% more people on bicycles, and there's going to be 30% more people sharing cars, and there's going to be, you know, all sorts of other things. So all of these things are part of the projections. And so I'm still very concerned about out commuting, that's all. I'm still very concerned about the amount of traffic on the roads, whatever the transport assessment says. I'm not sure I 100% believe it. And so I just want to take issue with keep calling Frome the most sustainable town. It isn't that sustainable, really. Anyway, other people want to speak, I'm sure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Helen. You don't need any more clarification from officers at the moment. Okay, thank you. I think the next one is Edric.
Thank you. In my utopia, people would cycle. I've just looked at some figures because in the space of your 1,700 cyclists, Barry, you can get 10 bicycles in the space of a car. So there's 4,000 cars. And when it comes to parking, you could park 8 bikes in the space of a car. But that aside, I'm not expecting everybody to cycle. I like to see me, don't ride to the old council meeting, but I would like to see more priority put on active travel to make the routes into town better. I appreciate this won't appeal to everybody, but I think we do need to have a shift towards trying to encourage if we have to have big developments, and I'm sure at some point this will get approved in some form. We need to have a shift towards encouraging people to use active travel methods. I was going to comment on trains. Well, Frome is quite poorly served by trains. It's on a small loop. I got the train yesterday to Swindon. It bypasses Frome. You go to Westbury and then on. It could do with being better served by the railway. I mean, having a station then on the corner of this where the line splits would be great, but I know that's not going to happen. Having sort of questioned Barry's thinking on that, I agree with him on everything else he said. I travelled to Swindon to work yesterday. I rode round some very new estates, recently developed, I would say within the last decade, on the outskirts of Swindon, badly connected, lip service paid to some environmental areas which clearly haven't any upkeeping in the last few years. You know, we'll put them in. Yeah, we've done that. We've put a wildlife there. They haven't been touched since they were put in. Unfinished paths. Back to my multi-use paths which have been graded with crush and vaguely screeded stuff, not stone dust like we've done. I totally agree that if it's not done to start with, it won't get done. They'll finish, they'll take the money, they'll flog the houses, they'll disappear. These things will not get finished. I could go on, but well, I do go on frequent, but I agree with everything Barry said, far more eloquent than I'm putting, about not finishing sites. And once sites are built out, they've gone, pay lip service, even to sort of children's play areas and things like that. Things don't get finished properly. And then maybe we as councils get left to pick at the pieces, or it's down to a management company run by people on site who may be keen when they move in there, but 15, 20 years down the line when tenants have moved on and people have moved on, who runs these things, who looks after them? They don't. They're made with poor quality materials, cheap equipment put in the play areas. They won't spend the money that we've just done as a town council here. They'll a couple of £1,000. It's even the same when we ask for things like bus shelter infrastructure. I've seen out the Penlee estate on the edge of Wells going out towards Wookey Hole. They'll put the cheapest stuff in they can. Nothing of any quality gets built by developers because they're paring it to the minimum to keep profits to the highest.
Okay, thank you, Edric. So, other people agree with you on that one. Claire.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at our legal advisor. And I would like to put a proposal that we refuse this application on grounds of sustainability, lack of robust economic plan to deliver at this scale. It's really important. It is the scale that will harm the environment and local community of Frome and surrounds. And we've got to be serious. We've got to take responsibility and not let it go through in the state it's in with the risks, harms. I don't want to go down the road of piecemeal planning at this scale. I've said it 3 times, it's the scale. It's not sustainable. The phase model, I don't believe, is sustainable.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to pop to Martin over there because I think he probably might want to second.
I very much like to second that. And I'd like to give an example. This morning we sat here for a very long time considering 2 applications, one in Wells, one in Glastonbury, very contentious, one for 47 houses, one for 30 to 40 houses. One was accepted, the other one wasn't. The same arguments applied. Infrastructure, roads, medical provision, schools, and so on. We're now looking at 1,700 homes. The sheer scale of that is almost inconceivable given the road structure of Frome and the facilities that exist, the college, the only secondary schools on the other side of town, the medical centre on the other side of town. We just don't have the infrastructure to support this. I've got a list of reasons, but I think Claire's covered some of them, to give as to the reasons why we might refuse. No matter, I know the officers will require some substantial reasons why we are going to, so I'd like to propose second that proposal.
Hang on, thank you, Martin. I want to go to Dawn here, or Martin here, to a bit. What happens if we refuse? Can we explain that, please?
Yes, Chair. Firstly, there's been a proposal to refuse the application, which has been seconded, so that is the substantive motion. As we discussed this morning, officers will need to unpack and understand your reasons for refusal. The first of which was the lack of sustainability of the development, you're saying. And I'll need the planning officers to comment on that. You mentioned the phasing plan. Now, the officer report sets out the controls that would be applied if permission was granted to ensure that the development that is before you complies to a list of parameter plans, and those are listed within the conditions. So those are specifically referred to and legally enforceable, and the development has to be in accordance with those parameter plans. There is also a phasing plan conditioned that must be adhered to for 6 phases. There are then conditions requiring compliance statements for each of the reserve matters, which must comply with those 6 phases. As a committee, as a local planning authority, if the harms and impacts of a development can be mitigated, controlled, managed by the use of conditions, and by the use of Section 106 obligations, then you should be approving that and not refusing that application, because there are controls available to the local planning authority to ensure that you get what is in the application. To answer your question directly, Chair, if the application is refused today, then the applicant has a right of appeal to go to the Secretary of State, who will appoint an inspector, independent inspector, who will then hold a public inquiry into the appeal, into the application. We, as the local planning authority, would need to bring evidence, substantial, technical, factual evidence to support each and every reason for refusal that's put forward. As I say, the inspector is independent from us, and they then have the power. They become the decision maker effectively, and the decision is taken out of the local planning authority's control. The inspector can impose whatever conditions he or she thinks fit, if they grant planning permission. So there's that as a possibility. If the refusal is upheld, then the application falls. In amongst all that, as well as having to provide evidence to substantiate our reasons, if an inspector finds that we are, as a local planning authority, incapable of doing that, that we cannot demonstrate that the harms substantially and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of the scheme, tilted balance again, then we are at risk financially. And I won't use the C word because it's been mentioned earlier. But you know, that is just something, a risk that you need to bear in mind. So we need to be very clear about the reasons for refusal, and officers need the ability to comment on those reasons for refusal before you move to a vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you. I think I've got a list here actually.
There's someone online as well.
I think I missed someone. I think Susie, did you put your hand up way earlier? I think I missed you. So can we let Susie come in first, please? I actually think I missed her. And then
Sorry, before you, there's also councillors online that's got their hands up. They can't speak. Okay.
I would have Susie first, because I think I missed a hand. Then I've got Dawn Denton, then Ros, then back to Helen. Can we do them in that order, please,
Yeah,
Chair?
we can.
Okay, thanks.
No problem at all. Okay, Susie. I can't hear you.
Okay, sorry, I think I'm going to be going somewhat against the flow. Not that I don't agree with the concerns that have been voiced around this room, because I think absolutely many of those concerns are valid. But I think at the same time, I feel I'm hearing far too much negativity. You know, LVA, from what we've seen of them, would appear to be serious and cooperative in the way that they have been dealing with us as a council or as officers. And, you know, ultimately, we've been taken to judicial review. We need to deliver houses, and they look like they're going to help us to deliver a huge number of houses. So if we can find ways to work with them in a controlled fashion, and ultimately that's partly our responsibility to ensure that we do things in the right way and we are enabled to enforce the requests that we put in place from the beginning, then I think we need to try not to be too negative. And I think we might just be missing a really amazing opportunity here to actually regenerate Frome, because there must have been a time when, you know, it's historically a beautiful town centre. It's run down. It isn't as well used as it could be. And actually bringing some more families and bringing some more funding and money into the area is not necessarily a bad thing. So I think I've heard too much negativity is what I think.
Okay, thank you, Susie. I think Dawn we had down next.
Yeah, this will probably only happen once every 365 days. I'm going to agree with Martin Dimmery because it's his birthday today. Steve Tanner, the leader of the Frome Town Council, said earlier that this development will drastically change Frome as a town and affect every resident in both Selwood and the Frome parishes. And I would go further to include Chapman Slade, which also objected across the Wiltshire border, and Lullington, which is north of Frome. So this development is going to have an impact in the future, but also on time, but also in distance. So we really, really do need to get this right for our residents. But I also am a little bit concerned about being careful what we wish for. If these landowners are ready to sell, does that not mean that they can each do their own thing? And that would mean that there would be loads of applications coming in, and it wouldn't be a coordinated plan, which this might offer. And I also know that this is very far into the future, and Frome will change, time will change, need will change. I mean, the projection of school placements is already on a down in Frome. We've not had schools being built in Edmund Park because of the numbers of school children. So we have to be really careful what we wish for. And I'm concerned that if we don't go with one big plan, then we might have lots of little plans, which could be worse and chaotic for the town. The new government also wants to build 2 million houses. They are behind schedule, and they're going to fulfill their targets. That's what they say they want to do. So does this mean that we have more of a chance of getting it overturned at appeal? And in the presentation, we made reference to the Secretary of State and Section 77. I'm not sure what that is about, where they said nothing about calling in sites or something. I'm not 100% sure what that means. Oh, thank you.
Martin, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, section 77 is if the local planning authority was minded to approve the application.
Yeah.
Because it's a departure application and the scale of it, we would need to notify the Secretary of State before we actually issued the bit of paper to to give the Secretary of State the opportunity to call in the application. And that would then result in an inquiry with an inspector, and the Secretary of State would make the ultimate decision. It's only if we are minded to approve the application that we need to do that. Okay.
Thank you, Martin.
But can I
Is
just
that
come back?
clear?
Yeah, thank you. I, as with everybody else in this room, I'm really, really concerned about the things that we've raised about the sewage, along with all the people who have objected and the people who have emailed. Our inboxes are full, and ultimately we do represent people. And we have to start with people first when we do anything. But I also am concerned about the 200 or the 20,000-ish other adults in Frome, the fact that they haven't objected. Does that mean that they support? Now, we don't know that, but we have to be really mindful of that. So it's a really tricky one. And I am concerned about all the things that we've listed today, which is why I actually cannot support this as it is now.
Thank you, Dawn. Rose, you're next.
Thank you. 2 or 3 things, if I may. First of all, I, like everyone's, had huge number of emails. One email which came through again and again kept on saying, oh, it has to be community-led. But actually, and it's all about developers. Well, actually, to have a planning site, you need the landowner's willingness to sell, as well as the developer, and as well as the how we move forward in terms of planning applications. So it's free, it's a freeway thing. And unless we go for compulsory purchase, say we want housing on that land and we're going to compulsory purchase it. And I don't think any of us are in that ballpark. So I think we've got to be careful when we talk about community-led developments, that actually we have to accept the far from perfect planning system and far from perfect approach in terms of we have an application in front of us where we've got a developer and we've got a willing seller of the land, and we've got something in front of us which I think we all recognise the community needs in terms of housing. The second thing is economic sustainability, which we're talking about. I talk as somebody who spent most of my life both in the UK and in third world countries around economic sustainability. And quite frankly, whatever people say, Frome is actually a lot more financially stable than many communities. It's not as run down as I think some of you were saying. There is a lot going on. But the only way you stay economically viable is to provide land and buildings to allow firms to go into a starter place or then moving on to step up their activity. We have already, we being Somerset Council, a enterprise centre in Frome. In fact, I think there is a new roof going on at the moment with it. And that provides a beginning, a starting point for many small businesses. We've seen the success of the cheese and grain, and particularly the studio there, etc. I could list. Frome is not on its legs. It's got a lot going for it. It is sustainable in terms of the economy, and we need more commercial places. The Frome Enterprise Centre, which the council owns, could be oversubscribed a large number of times because people do need both starting and step up facilities. So I think it's not the role of a developer to become an economic driver. It's providing something the market wants, which they recognise. It provides a balanced development. And again, I think locating it where it did, I think is really helpful. I would support the idea that active travel is really important, and we could see a bit more detail in the town. And in terms of active travel, there is the Frome missing links, which is almost all the way to the Somerset Circle. And so if we're looking about adding and supporting community facilities and infrastructure, that is reasonable. In terms of doctor's surgery, I'm delighted that provision is made for a satellite surgery, but the reality is GPs are absolutely like gold dust, and therefore you don't want them travelling around. You want people to go to the GPs because it's, you know, we need to max out the GP time. So yes, make provision for the future, but the reality is you're not likely to get people, GPs, sort of running a morning surgery somewhere in a hurry. Inevitably, Frome is going to change, and I suspect this development will change. I think the critical thing, which I'm not sure we've heard enough about, is the governance around this. I know that there are plans and they've got all sorts of things. I've heard mention the garden town concept, somebody earlier today. For a while I sat on the Taunton Garden Town Board, and while there are a lot of laudable objectives, I do think that it's a very a clanky way of trying to govern things. And I do think perhaps we need to think a bit more about the governance. But the very fact that we've got phasing on this development gives me some hope that we will get a scheme which can move forward with some movement. I'm interested about Wessex Water and their plans, and I would agree that it needs to be well and truly conditioned. The amount of spillage into the rivers is just totally unacceptable, and we need to use this scheme as a lever to get a better response out of Wessex Water. And I'll say that openly, because I do feel the spillage rates are just not acceptable. But overall, what we've got in front of us is, I think maybe it was the town council or one of your colleagues talked to, oh no, it's the Civic Society, talking about an urban extension. And Frome has been successful. It's attracted an awful lot of people from outside Frome, and it needs to be supported to grow. And this seems to me a very thought out scheme. Yes, I'm sure we can tighten it up, and there are lots of bits and pieces which you may feel not sure we've got enough detail. But you know, just like the archaeological survey, it's not unreasonable to do desktop, get the approval, and then do the follow up. So on balance, I would be prepared to support this scheme because I think it's delivering something for Frome in terms of a cohesive, thought through plan. I do recognise that it has huge implications for the town, but then planning does, whether it's 10 houses in a village or 1,700 in Frome, they can have huge impacts. And I do think that there's been quite a lot of care, but I would commend the approach so far. And it has taken a while to get here. I've been hearing about it 6, 7 years. And I don't think
7 years.
7 years, is it? Okay. I don't think this is about greed. It's about trying to move something forward. And I really do think Frome deserves to have a decent, thought-through plan. And yes, I'm sure we can get the conditions right to improve on it. But underlying issue is that if we walk away and say it's not acceptable, then what do you get instead? And I'm not convinced. I have a lot of confidence. I'd rather have one decent, good scheme which we can support. Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn. Yeah, Helen. I'm sorry, Ross. I'll come to you in a minute, Dawn. I had you in my head. Helen.
Okay, so I'm looking at 3 ways to go here. So I've got 3 different lists. if the proposal falls and then we get another proposal saying let's accept this application as it is, then I've got a whole list of conditions that I'd like to go through, right? So that's things like no skylights or roof lights in the design code because we've got to respect the bats, all sorts of small things like that. No, I just want to go through those small things, please, right? And making sure we've got the Wessex Water sewage plan in place, all those things, having a proper traffic plan for Frome, having more money for the active travel scheme, all of those things are kind of the things that I would ask for if this is going to go through. However, that's not what's on the table just yet. So the second tack is that if we are going to go for refusal, I've written down a few other things that to support that refusal in terms of sustainability, because it's got to have legs, because we're being told that it's going to go to appeal and that it's going to come back, and we've got to be able to show that why it isn't sustainable. So we have to quote things like the level of out commuting as predicted by the developers, the pressure on the local roads and the lack of a plan to manage those impacts on local roads. We've got just 60,000 going for the butts and 100,000 for improving the Gore Hedge junction. There needs to be, that's not sufficient. We need to say it's going to affect the character of the landscape and the setting of the town. And these are planning reasons. We need to say that there's no proper, I think we can say there's no proper delivery vehicle at the moment, or governance vehicle. We can say that the climate impacts are not fully taken account of. So these are other things. We can say the effects on residents' amenity, because it's used a lot for walking and cycling and people going. So these are all just planning reasons that you need to add to give it legs if you're going to refuse it. The other option that no one's talked about is deferring, right? So the other thing we could do is go for deferral. Sorry, I feel like I should be a legal advisor here, right? The other thing we could do is go for deferral. I've got a whole list of things that we could defer on. We have to, when it comes back, and then we have this day all over again. We do it all over again. But it is complicated. And we really, in some ways, we've only just started to get our heads around it because it is complicated, right? So we could defer it. We could say there's no proper master plan. There's no proper delivery vehicle for governance. We want to see a detailed plan for transport improvements in Frome. We want all local councillors involved in Section 106 negotiations. We need to look at climate impacts. We need an infrastructure plan for sewage. We need, I don't know, other things, Active Travel England to be consulted with. I believe Wiltshire and Baines were not consulted with. So, for example, people in Chapman's Lade are really concerned that lots of extra traffic is going to be going from this development to people that still live in work in London and drive through Chapman's Lade to get to Westbury. So there's all sorts of other things that we could do. If we deferred it, yes, we'd have to have this discussion all over again. But I do think that it's important, in a way. You might want to just get it out of your hair, but if you don't live in Frome. But if you do live in Frome, you really want to get it right. And if, as Councillor Wyke has said, at the end of the day, this is going to go through the planning. If it goes to appeal, we may not win that appeal. Then we want it to be as good as it can be. And so deferral is another way that we can do that to try and beef it up so that it is a lot better than it is at the moment. So I'm just putting that out there as a third way. Yeah, thank you. I don't know if Martin wants to say anything to that. Yeah.
I would just like to speak to Dawn before she, just in case she wants to dismantle. I mean, I can't think of another word, but because I had never really had a chance to say anything more. I said a few things, and there's been a few comments back. I'm not saying I've got all the answers, but we've got to make a decision on what we can't make a decision on what we think might happen. Okay, so it's what's in front of us, right? But I did learn that. I learned that from our training. So Dawn said lots of little plans that might not work. How and why? Well, that, I dismissed that because lots of little plans might work. I'm not saying we're going to have lots of little plans in the future, but that's talking about something that might happen. So we can't look at that. What I was trying to talk about was economic sustainability at this scale, right? So then I get back, we need housing, so let's have this, right? That's to me, let's have anything, we need housing, let's do it. I don't buy that argument. It's community led. I never said that. I said deliver for the community. I know it can't be community led. We can't get these guys all in a room doing what the experts do, but deliver for the community. Look what we've done in Somerset with our towns, Yeovil, Taunton. You know, when we don't get it right, when we do piecemeal planning that doesn't deliver for the community. I really welcome what Helen said about other sustainability areas that can come under this umbrella of what I'm trying to present, the characters of the town in the areas being impacted, sustainability, the climate impacts, the residents' amenity. So the legal advisor did say something, right, that it was a little bit of a, he sort of said that, well, it might be upheld. We might be upheld. We don't hear that very often, do we, when we hear the argument that we will lose at appeal. We hear we will lose at appeal. We don't hear the bit where it says, where someone says it might be upheld, what we say. And we've done that already today. So I wanted to just say that I'm not just throwing these words out there. I can't do it by myself. I need, you know, others to buy into this idea of that we're brave and we dismiss this, because I think the scale is the problem. And I think that, yes, there's going to be, and as the legal advisor said, there's going to be phases, there's going to be safeguards, there's going to be insurances and all that. These are words. And we know from our experience of planning that when we go to when there's the next stage, things move. And we can't question it because guess what? Outline permission's been given. So I just want to say, look at what is in front of us now, not what we think might happen. And then your tilted balance is on what might happen with everything working well. That's where you take the tilted balance. But I'm saying the tilted balance on economic level, sustainability level will bring harms. At the moment, what's in front of me to the local area town.
Okay, thank you, Claire. Now, Dawn, you are ready to come in.
Okay, despite members' views, I'm not here to deconstruct anything. I'm just here to sort of give advice in terms of what you've got in front of you and what you're looking at. A lot of concerns that I've heard through the debate, and I've tried not to interject too much because it's a big scheme. You guys need to get to grips with the decision that you're making. But the concerns that I've heard is about the uncertainty of delivery, about the potential impact, about the how do we secure everything, and what does the community get from it. So based on that, you know, the obligations that are going to be secured through a legal agreement, so will be legally binding on the applicant, are set out on page 92 and 93 of the report. But effectively, you heard it from the agent, it's £27 million of contributions. So it is a large scheme, it's a significant development. There are significant investments coming through to look at mitigation, betterment, contributions, and financial contributions to everyone that's asked for it. In terms of policy compliance, they are delivering everything they've been asked to the tune of 27 million currently, and that didn't include the balance. I think he also said if you're factoring the affordable housing into that, that's 78 million equivalent. So it's huge figures because it's a huge scheme. So in terms of value and what the community get from it, and this is why we work really, really hard as planning officers to try and get the best out of the scheme for the community, appreciating that it is outside the settlement boundary. In terms of security with actually getting everything come forward, you know, the risk of something this big, you know, yes, things do change in 15 years. Yes, viability might change in 15 years. In terms of the contributions that you've got set out on page 92 and 93, they will be in a Section 106 legal agreement with LVA. When they sell off parcels, they'll be selling them off to developers with them knowing that these are the obligations and these are the requirements. In terms of the conditions, so there's been a lot of concern about how the design's being pulled through, how the drainage is being worked out. They are all set out in the conditions at the back of the report. So there are about 3 or 4 conditions about how you would pull through the design standards, compliance statements of any subsequent approval of reserve matters back to those design statements. So it becomes, those design parameter plans become part of determining any future phases of development. So from an officer perspective, but I'm happy to hear any additional conditions that members think may be required. And similarly for surface water and foul water drainage, again, that's tied up in conditions as well. So that is set out from conditions 20 to 23. And the application was supported with an ES that goes into socioeconomic considerations. So from an officer perspective, you know, we are satisfied that the recommendation has been put forward with significant contributions to the community. It is a significant size development, so I'm pleased that all the members have engaged to try and get to grips with all the different situations. But that, you know, what is before you is something with significant infrastructure contributions for the community. And officers consider the conditions cover the elements of uncertainty that members have been raising. But again, if the recommendation to refuse does fail, I'm more than happy to discuss conditions further. But I just wanted to highlight, if you're looking at this scheme, this is what you're getting from this scheme, and these are the controls you've got through this scheme. And having it as one scheme with one legal agreement with all of the contributions in it, you've got a much greater degree of certainty than in the event it comes forward in smaller land parcels, because smaller land parcels don't support this scale of infrastructure investment.
Okay, thank you, Dawn. Martin wants to come in now.
Thank you, Chair. Just in relation to reference to an appeal, I think it's worth just emphasising the background to this in terms of the national background. You know, recent statements and action by the government ministers and recent appeal decisions, it's very clear that the government's determined to significantly increase the number of houses being permitted. And there's been a recent call in Swale Borough Council in Kent for 8,400 houses. So clearly the national agenda is moving to significant delivery of housing. So any appeal would have that background, and we'd probably in the situation of a new NPPF at that point. Sorry. A new NPPF at that point. So I think members need to bear that in mind. In terms of a refusal being upheld by an inspector as an appeal, that's always within the gift of the inspector, but they would only do so if they are satisfied that the reasons for refusal are robust and supported by evidence. So if they are not neither of those, and we don't have the evidence, then the inspector will not go with us. And as I mentioned, there are potential financial consequences in terms of costs. So the substantive motion is still to refuse the application. We do still need to unpack, before we get to a vote on that, as to what impacts you are concerned about. You know, specific impacts. Councillor Kay, I think, listed some just now that could potentially form part of that reason. But yes, we need to break that down and understand, and we can advise then as officers on each element of those before we go to a vote. Two other things. In terms of the information that's before you, if you are unsatisfied or unclear about what is before you, and you feel that you require more information, more evidence, more data before you make a final decision, then it is always in your gift to defer today to request officers to go away and get that. That is one other option for you, and that was mentioned. If members of the committee as a whole are minded to refuse the application, given the importance and scale of the application, given the consequences of a refusal, another option is to be minded to refuse, but defer for the final reasons for refusal to come back to committee for ratification. And I say that is some councils require that as part of their standing orders, but it is a means of ensuring that we're not drafting reasons for refusal on the hoof in committee. Now, it has to come from members as to what your concerns are, but the wording of those conditions are going to be critical if we get into an appeal situation. So that I'm just putting that as another suggestion for members.
I come back, please. I really welcome your advice. I think when you say the consequences of us refusing, that will just put the fear in everybody around the table. I think the consequences of us agreeing to something that does have sustainability issues, economic issues, if it's going to fail, and I feel it fails on what it actually is, what is presented to us in terms of sustainability. There's that we can unpack it and add to that and work together. But you've given almost another way that we can do that. The legal advice almost says that we can consider, but it also feels like it's too big for us to refuse it. It almost feels like we can't refuse this because of the size of it and the risk to refusing it. When you're talking, I can't hear. Sorry.
Yeah, hold on a minute, Claire. We've got quite a few other speakers left at the moment, so we'll have to come back to you. I think
Can I just quickly comment on your behalf, Chair, because we've been very busy.
Yeah.
Councillor highlighted to me the time is 6 o'clock. We normally finish at 6 from 2 o'clock start. We didn't start till 2:30, Benty, so we can go to 2:30 before we need to take a vote. Great, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that. Emma wants to come in next. I think she's been waiting a long time.
Okay, thank you. So, Emma.
Thank you very much. Several people have mentioned sustainability of the location, Active Travel England. I wanted to set the record straight on, certainly on one of those things. Active Travel England did not exist when this application was submitted. I specifically asked them to look at this application effectively retrospectively, and they refused. It is not in their remit to do so. They can't look at something that has already been submitted. I therefore sought internal Active Travel comments from our internal Active Travel team, which is now one person, but it was more at the time. The scheme has provided significant active travel links. It is being used as an exemplar across the county as how active travel should be done on a large site. Not only is it being used as that exemplar, but they are also providing a travel plan. That's where the modal shifts come in. The travel plan has measures in it that monitor and improve the shift from private motor vehicle to car share to the electric scooters or bikes that are being provided, that provide modal shift to the car club that is being provided as part of the scheme that is before you now. They're also providing green travel vouchers that residents can exchange for push bikes or scooters of their own. There are also off-site active travel contributions being put forward to the tune of £600,000. I don't think that's been mentioned as yet, which is why I wanted to make sure that you were aware that they are doing on-site active travel as well as off-site active travel. They are funding cycle stands in various places. It might not sound like a big thing, but I'm sure I've just won Edric over. But it is one of those things that is part of the cycling infrastructure, that if you cycle your bike to somewhere and you have nowhere to lock your bike, then you cycle back home again and get the car and do it that way. And station improvements as well, for a station improvement study, as well, is also being funded. I think that was everything I wanted to say about active travel. But yeah, there are off-site measures being put forward. There are significant on-site measures. It is a great scheme as far as active travel is concerned. And I would love Active Travel England to have had a look at it and given their comments. but unfortunately they can't won't.
Okay, thank you for that. We're going to Adam now.
Thank you. I'd just like to add a few thoughts to the potential reasons for refusal. That it's a departure from the local plan in many ways. I know the applicants and the office team work together very hard, and there's lots of good things in this scheme, lots of good things you want to promote: active travel, green infrastructure strategy, getting everything right, getting nearly right. But I've still got residual concerns about the residual traffic impacts, the residual environmental impacts. I think if we had to have this scheme, there's a lot going for it. Question is, do we have to? And because despite the mitigation measures in the scheme and in the conditions in Section 106, which I'm sure we all appreciate, it's what's left after the mitigation has had an effect. There is a residual impact on the site being developed in this manner, at this scale, and on Frome. So there's a line, I think something called, like, there's a disproportionate level of growth for Frome. Is that sustainable? That's in the report. So that could be an issue. We find a reason around that disproportionate level of growth, which hasn't been in the local plan, and it's not in line with that. So that, for me, there's residual environmental effects, be they significant, severe, major, and residual transport and traffic effects. That despite the mitigation, there will be a residual overriding impacts from this scheme, which leads me to, on balance, just about think I'm going to support the reasons for the refusal of this. So, and I think we've talked about a lot of issues, and there's a lot of going through the minutes of this and the transcript even to find out what we said, because we've said an awful lot. A lot of issues have been discussed, and the reasons are in there. And there's also impact on social services, impact on the town, and medical, question marks about the medical provision, question marks about school elsewhere. There's mitigation, but is there an overwhelmingly negative impact? I think there is. That's why I vote the way I am. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Adam. Benty, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have now been here for 3.5 hours debating this here application, and it is 35 minutes since it was proposed and seconded, and we have not had the vote. And to you, Mr. Chairman, I would say I have been here to many meetings for many years, and I have luckily only in the last period here had to sit and be told off like a naughty schoolgirl for not understanding that if I vote against, then it will go to appeal. I have never heard anything from anybody suggesting a way that would go forward. I sat when Nigel Woollacombe-Adams was here, and he would always find something that was usable in case there was a risk of the applicant going to whatever. And I don't need also at the same mouthful to hear 3 different way out of either proposal, refusing, or referring it. It is all taking time, and here we are. In 20 minutes we can all go home, and then we got 20 minutes to do a very serious vote, which is taking part. And I won't say any more now. I should have been at a doctor's surgery for a patient group meeting now. I will be late, but that is fine.
Yeah, first we're going to move on to another person who's next one, which is going to be Dawn, but I'm just going to mention that we take a vote at 6:30 of whether to continue the meeting. Thank you. So, Dawn.
I think what we need to decide as a group is, are we saying no? And that's just it. If we say, no, I know, but my point is a deferral means in my head that we're happy with it, but we've got issues that need to be clarified. So in that sense, because once those are addressed, we have an obligation to then tick those off as being addressed. So we have to make that decision, and that's all I wanted to say, because I think a deferral means that we are happy with it as a scheme, but we'd like certain issues addressed.
Okay, thank you. Next one, we're back to you, Helen.
Yeah, addressing Dawn's point, I think possibly that's how I presented it, because I'm worried about the fact that it might go to appeal, obviously. But I think Martin's found a way out for us. The legal advisor said that we could do a third option, something we haven't mentioned yet, which was to defer it. That we minded, I just trying to, can you repeat it? Because I actually have never heard that before, and I'd like to actually get it, really understand it. That we're minded to refuse it, but instead we're going to defer it subject to getting several of these other things in place. And then those things need to be listed. And then we don't have to give, presumably, the refusal reasons today, like the sustainability and the effect on the character of the landscape, the setting of the town, the fact that it's too big, all those things. We don't have to do that today. I think that we do have to then give reasons. We do have to then say what extra evidence we want, and then we debate it again. Is that right? Can you give me the wording again?
Not quite.
Not quite. Okay.
So it would be minded to refuse the The committee would be minded to refuse the application, but the application be deferred for officers to work up the wording of the reasons for refusal.
Oh, it's a different thing.
No, yes,
Okay.
yes. So it is different. We would need to understand, if that was the committee's wish, what it is that members are concerned about, and some of that has already come out in debate. But we need to be clear before we go to any vote as to what those issues are. But that is an option that I've seen. It has been used here many years ago, but it is used by the local planning authorities where there are significant, impacts.
Excuse me, can you remove the person who's live online, please, Deb? Sorry to interrupt, Martin.
It is a mechanism that I have seen used. So
that was actually not what I had understood you to say, and so I just want to say instead, can I say I'd like to put on the table that if this motion falls, I'd like to put on the table to defer this to another for a list of reasons. That's if this current motion falls. Have you got that? Somebody got that? Yeah, thank you.
Okay, next one in is Susie.
Sorry, I think councillors need to think really long and hard before voting this proposal down, and need to really step back and look at the big picture, the bigger picture. I just want to say that if the current proposal on the table falls, I would like to propose that we vote in favour of the recommendation, and that we put in the caveats in an attempt to allay the fears that are being voiced around the room.
Okay, thank you. You'll have to find a seconder. Our next person is Martin D.
Excuse me, I've just noticed, as Mike Ribb is on executive online, is Mike allowed to speak? He's got his hand up. Is he allowed?
No.
I didn't realise it works differently because he's not a member.
Sorry, Mike.
Okay.
Can I do a point of order? All this time, all this gap, right?
Point of order, can I speak, please?
I'll say really quick.
Martin's
Okay,
down to speak next.
Am I not allowed to do
In a
that?
minute, yeah.
Chair, can I just so our fellow members know, I have in order, because I've been trying to keep notes, it's quite difficult. Susie, I think you just spoken. I've got Martin next, then I've got Ros, then I've got Barry to come back in. That's the order I've got on my list of notes.
I've got Claire after Barry.
And Claire has to go after Barry, please. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, Martin.
Thank you very much. So can I have clarification? We can make a decision today to refuse, and we can have a month until the next meeting to consider, and the officers go off and consider the reasons, and they would try and get watertight reasons why we can refuse. Is that correct, Martin?
You would phrase it minded to refuse. Yeah. Which would allow officers, once we understand what the concerns are of members, because at the moment we're still, that hasn't been really laid out. But
may we come back to you in writing with those reasons?
No, it needs to be. I mean, it doesn't need to be, we don't need to be drafting, reasons for refusal here, but we need to understand the issues and the impacts that specifically that you are concerned about, and that we can then, as officers, if that's the committee's wish, go away and work on those and come back with reasons for refusal and the advice on those. So I suppose the final decision to refuse wouldn't be this evening. It would be when you've seen those worked out reasons for refusal. But I really need to emphasise this. Those issues and reasons for refusal need to come from members. Now, a statement saying that the development is not sustainable and there will be impacts on Frome, that needs to be unpacked. And so, some of that we've got. We've had a list from Councillor Kay of some of those specific impacts, but we need to understand those rather than sort of a general statement.
And may I, Mr. Chairman, supplement to that? We've been advised recently that to dilute our reasons to one reason. I have enormous fear that one reason will be picked off pretty quickly, and that we need to be able to present a list.
There's no rule about one reason or 9 reasons, but each and every reason for refusal has to stand on its own 2 legs and has to be supported by evidence. So if you can condense those reasons for refusal, then fine. But if they are different subject matters about different issues, then they can be in separate reasons for refusal.
Thank you.
Thank you both, Martins there. Next is Ros.
Thank you. I've heard a number of people say this is too big an application. So if we unpack that, it means 10 applications with 170 houses, plus another lot of applications for commercial units. It also means probably other applications for the school and for other facilities. And the reality is we also say goodbye probably to any contribution for the upgrade to the sports facilities in the town, etc., etc. The reality is sometimes one needs to actually take a thought through consideration. 1,700 houses in a town where Frome has been so successful and has attracted so many people, and you have individuals whose children can't get houses in the town, etc. We've been constraining the growth of Frome, and by turning around and saying, oh, 1,700's too big, yes, I agree with you, it's a huge impact. But proportionally to a population and the way Frome has grown and the attraction of Frome, I don't think that it's unreasonable. And by saying it's too big and we want it broken down into smaller chunks, then I'm just wondering, what are we giving up? At the moment, it's about 28 million of contribution. I'm not. I understand that a big development is always frightening, whether it's 200 houses in a village or whether it's 1,700 houses in Frome. But the reality is that's the only way we get the significant contribution, the economic support for the town's growth. And so I think we've got to be careful by saying the application's too big. There may be other reasons why people are uncomfortable with, but I think it's saying it's too big probably doesn't carry as much planning weight as you would anticipate.
Thank you, Ros. I'm going to go back to Barry now.
Just being practical, Chairman, if we're going to do a deferral, we do it for 2 months. Christmas fortnight will be in the middle of this. If we do it for 1 month, and 2 months will give everybody a lot more time to sit and have a good think about it.
Thanks for that, Barry. We still got the one on things to refuse completely. Claire. Yeah, Claire.
Hang on a second. Ros, I really don't like that, what you said to me just then.
I'm just saying a lot of people said
Right, what I'm not happy about is the procedural thing here. I put a proposal, right, and instead of giving it a chance to put it out, you could have put it out there straight away, okay? Or we could have just discussed what it actually was. Instead, you spent over half an hour telling me about why it would, that we needed to unpack it. We needed to find these reasons. Now we've got a few minutes. You could have got this vote out the way and then spent time on refining it. And I just think so I've had to respond because I've heard other people interpret what our proposal was for the rest of the committee to consider instead of involving it, So this delay in not putting this vote across has dismantled it, okay? I just don't think there's enough time. But listening to what others have said, okay, the harms outweigh the benefits, the departure from the local plan, the environmental impact, the economic arguments, I think on the sustainability of it being things like it being disproportionate for the growth of Frome, and with the infrastructure and the residual impacts on transport, the character of the town in the area, the climate impacts and the residents' amenity. And then I've got some things here on sustainability, but of course we've got no time to package this up and to make it a
Hold on, Claire, we're going to come in on there. You're wrong.
What do you mean? We have got time.
Yeah, we just have to take a quick vote in a minute.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, instead of it being a robust proposal, when we could have spent all that, we could.
No. We're having a vote to extend the meeting.
Okay.
Shortly, so you'll have loads of time, or as much time as you want.
Go on forever, all night, can we? My point is what Benty said, that you've had a huge delay after this proposal was put on the table to repeatedly tell us that the same thing, that we need to have good reasons for refusing, and it's the same thing over and over again.
Yes, two things. Firstly, when we get to 6:30, members can vote to extend the meeting to finish this item. Okay. Yes, well, those other agenda items after this will not happen this evening. Secondly, members need to understand before the vote as to what they are being asked to vote on. So the detail of those reasons for the reason for refusal needs to be set out so councillors sat around the table understand what it is that they're being asked to vote on. As I said, sort of a general statement when you at the point of vote isn't sufficient. You can't then do that and work up the detail afterwards. You need to know, or at least have an understanding of what it is before you put your hand up. That's why, councillor, we're asking, and we're not seeking to dismantle the proposal. We're just needing to understand more about what the concerns are. Yes, just now. Yes, just now. That's right. So we've had a list just now from Councillor Sully, who's the proposer. If there are any other issues that the proposer and seconder, Councillor Dimery, wishes to include in that list, and also whether the proposer and seconder are willing to go with the suggestion of minded to refuse, to work up those reasons for refusal. If you can consider that, please.
Thank you, Martin. But I think we'd better go to the vote to extend the meeting for a half an hour or however long it takes now. So all those in favour of extending the meeting so that we can get this business done?
9.
All those against?
1, 2, 3.
No, 4.
5.
5. Okay, any abstentions? No, so we will be carrying on.
What that does mean, Chair, if I may, it means the other agenda items after this particular item will not be heard this evening and will be deferred to a future meeting. There are 2 applications and an appeal report.
Yeah. Thank you, Martin. Here's, I think that's taken on board again. Okay, we've got Adam next.
Thank you. Can I make a proposal that we are minded to refuse this and defer the reasons for refusal for future ratification? Or that the chair, the proposer and the seconder agree to that, so that we can do as Martin Evans has said. And then we've had lots of discussion about reasons for refusal, but we are minded to refuse now and defer the reasons for refusal for future ratification.
Thank you. Martin D.
I don't know how Claire feels about this, but I'd be prepared to support that now.
Can I respond to that?
Claire, yeah.
Would like such little time has gone into this actual list. I've said it once, right? So rather than really hearing the list through, but I guess it makes sense if I can just do it once more. Okay, if you think it will change, if you think you want to think these things through. I mean, does this mean that the officers will support us on the refusal? Does it mean, or are they going to still try and change your mind? It's a question.
Yeah, it's
Chair,
a question.
you're
Who
going
can
on.
answer this question?
I will.
You will, Dawn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In terms of the recommendation on the application, that is members. Your role as committee members is to come to a recommendation. In terms of the proposal that has been offered through legal, it's about, we need to understand what the issue is, which has been listed. The members around the table need to understand what they're voting on. Then they need to vote. And then if it is deferral for a couple of months to draft up what you think that looks like in a reason for refusal, you share that with officers. Officers will help you to try and make sure that it's as robust as it can be, given that officers are minded to support the application, but we will work to try and ensure we have the best position we can do at appeal. But so it's not something that we will do. It is something for members to do, but officers will work with members to try and ensure that it's as robust as it can be.
Yeah.
Right, so this is a list because obviously things under the umbrella of what I was first talking about have been collected. So the harms outweigh the benefits, right? And these are the list of it. The departure from the local plan, the environmental impact on the area, and the loss of much valued landscape. Not sustainable for Frome, a disproportionate level of growth in terms of infrastructure for the town, the residual impacts on transport, the character of the town in the area, the climate impacts, the residents' amenities being removed, no delivery vehicle to make sure that the vision in the outline planning is actually delivered. So those are the list of things.
Okay, so we've got a list. I think, yeah, we've got.
Martin, then Ros.
Yeah.
May I?
Yeah, Martin.
May I add two more possibilities to that list as the seconder? Unsustainable flood and water management, and I beg your pardon, insufficient section 106 funding allocated to town and parish councils. Is that not a reason? They'd mentioned transport before.
Thank you. I would be interested to hear from members in terms of the list. There are some that would be more easily defendable than others, because at the moment it felt a little bit like a shopping list in terms of every single thing that could be mentioned. Whereas if we can condense concerns into areas that we want to defend at appeal, because if we're defending, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 reasons for refusal, we need evidence for every single one of those. I'm happy to take away that list, and I'm happy to come back to you with probably a condensed version of that list in terms of what we feel would be most defendable at appeal, but that means there might be some of those things in that list that don't end up making a reason for refusal.
Okay, thank you, Dawn. Ros?
I wonder if we could actually clarify what is meant by residential amenities. Which residents? The residents within the scheme or the existing residents of Frome? I think they're two different groups and we need some clarity which one you're referring to.
It's existing residents.
Existing residents, okay, thank you. And in terms of character, is this landscape character or is it something else?
It's the character. Am I, Chair, are we just doing a two-way debate here? Or are we going through the chair? It's the character of the place, like we were talking with the previous application about the Glastonbury losing its character, which the conservation officer said them that in their statement. So it's the character of the place, of the area.
And the setting of the town.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you both. Adam, you wanted to say something?
It was just that, yes, can we make a vote? We've got the ideas across. The officers will go away for 2 months. We'll draft something up. We'll decide the detail next time. I think we're there. Can we vote? Thank you.
Okay, let's go to the vote. Let's see who's doing what. So we're going to go for this Claire's motion, which you explained you want to go against officer recommendation. So you want to go to refuse.
Chair, can I?
Martin's going to come in.
Sorry, shall I try and just summarise what the proposal now is, and correct me if I get this wrong. So the committee be minded to refuse the application, that officers be delegated to go away for 2 months to work up the reasons for refusal. And those are the list that we've just been through. I can list those again if you want, but I think everybody heard them. So it's minded to refuse, officers to go away to work up the reasons for refusal and to come back in 2 months' time. Okay.
Okay, thanks. Everybody got that? Right. Okay, everyone in favour of that motion? Everyone against that motion?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
5. So the motion, oh, no, sorry, abstentions. Okay, so the motion is carried. Okay, so it is refused.
Minded to refuse.
Minded to refuse, yeah.
Brought back in
January or February. Okay, thank you. So that's that one. As we've done the other stuff, we're there.
Thank you, Chairman.